Welcome to March, FFPCers, and welcome to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show presented by the Fantasy Football Players Championship live on the Better Sports Network. It is March 6th, 2025, and we have a great show for tonight. I am Eric Balkman, your host, at Eric Balkman on the X, Blue Sky. Of course, you know me from the HSFF Hour, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, and the Fantasy Football Players Championship with a Dynasty-focused show tonight and definitely some rookies as well. With Dynasty Nerds own Rich Dotson at Dynasty Rich on X, Dynasty Nerds on X, of course, dynastynerds.com. Rich, so glad to have you aboard, man. This is exciting tonight. You got the Nick Chubb thing in the background. I've made a plan that we are going to lead off with Cleveland Browns stuff tonight.
Okay. All right.
And like any good plan, that gets thrown out the window thanks to all the things that happened in the NFL today. But welcome aboard, man. So glad to have you doing this show.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, Eric. It's always fun to talk some dynasty, some fantasy football, NFL, all in general. It's what I do, so it's always a pleasure.
I've had Garrett do this show. In fact, a couple of years ago, we did the Dynasty Nerds FFPC crossover, where I think it was the week before the NFL draft that Garrett co-hosted the FFPC show with me for 2 hours, and then I co-hosted the Dynasty Nerds show with him on BSM for 2 hours after that, and it was a lot of fun. So I'm glad to have another part of the Dynasty Nerds franchise aboard tonight. And let me tell you this, just as an aside, I was just listening to the latest podcast that came out today with you and Garrett and Matt, and you guys do a fantastic job with that. It's a great listen. So keep up the great work. And not only do I want you to promote your podcast here, but everything that you have going on at Dynasty Nerds to lead off the show.
Oh yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, like you said, the Dynasty Nerd podcast right now. If you tune in, we're doing our bread and butter, which is a rookie breakdowns. We're gonna go through every rookie possible, kind of break down the prospects, let you know how we view them from a fantasy football aspect, right? That's what we want to do. So we've been doing that for 11 years now. We've had a lot of success. You know, where a lot of the people in the industry go left, we'll go right. So that's what we're doing right now in the Dynasty Nerds podcast, obviously on X, Twitter at Dynasty Rich. But you know, dynastynerds.com, YouTube, anywhere there's social media, use it for Dynasty Nerds, and we're gonna be pumping out content every single day.
Yeah, which is great. And there's no shortage of it, and you guys do a great job with that. We like to think we do a great job with contests at the FFPC. And if you're looking to take Rich Dotson's advice tonight and make it actionable, check out the FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball and Never Too Early Superflex Best Ball tournaments. The Never Too Early Best Ball tournament will set you back $125, but you can win $40,000 as the grand prize there. $10,000 grand prize with a $35 entry fee in the Superflex version. These tournaments are already off and running. They're going to go through April 24th, which is the first day of the NFL draft. They are available now. Drafts are 30-second, 60-second, 2-hour, and a 6-hour clock. MyFFPC.com is where to go for that. So much fun. Like, everybody who is drafting in this tournament will be drafting teams, including rookies, that we have no idea where their landing spot is, because these drafts will end by the time the NFL draft starts. You can also check out the FFPC Big Gorilla Tournament, a $1 million grand prize, $350 entry fee on that one. Drafts are running both live and slow. You can get in now, and you will automatically be entered into the early Rampage tournament as well. So one $350 entry fee, you're in the Big Gorilla tournament, and you're in the early Rampage tournament. It's 2 tournaments for the price of one. 7 Bananas promo is live as well. Keep getting that number 7 pick 2, 3, 4, 5 times in a row, and we will pay for a jungle safari for 4 for you at myffpc.com if you keep getting that 7 pick. We've already dumped out several entry fees as prizes for people who've gotten the 7 pick in consecutive drafts. MyFFPC.com is where to go, and this is the part that you'll care about tonight since we're talking so much Dynasty. If you want to take over a Dynasty Orphan, we have plenty of them going on at MyFFPC.com. Those entry fees range from $77 all the way up to $5,000, and a lot of those entry fees have been lowered for 2025 already. 1,800 plus leagues in 15 years. Not a single FFPC Dynasty League has ever folded. So, you know, once you get in, you're going to be in there for good until you want to leave. Again, myffpc.com. Shout out to our producer, Matt Deutsch. Let's get things going, Rich, with the big news of the day. And that, of course, without question, was the Falcons re-signing long snapper Liam McCullough to a 4-year contract through 2028. No, just kidding. We won't talk about that. We will, however, go a little bit further south from Atlanta and talk about what the Jacksonville Jaguars did today. So much stuff going on. I want to lead things off with the release of Evan Engram, Rich. This is a player that we knew had the possibility of being released. We knew that this could be a cap casualty, and as of March 6th, he is indeed not going to be a Jacksonville Jaguar in 2026. He is over the age of 30. He had a really significant shoulder injury that kept him on injured reserve to end the 2024 season. But this is a player that, was the yin, at least I thought was going to be the yin to Brian Thomas's yang. It's not going to happen. 2023, he caught 114 passes. They only saved $6 million against the cap. The dead cap is almost $14 million for the Jaguars. James Gladstone is the new GM, and he went out of his way. I think it was his introductory press conference to talk up Brenton Strange, who obviously last year when Evan Engram was hurt, we saw some big spike week games from Brenton Strange more than once. This is an interesting situation. We'll get to Brenton Strange in a second. Let's talk about Evan Engram. I always feel like in my dynasty leagues, when a player like this gets released, and it's just human nature, right? Like, we don't know where this guy is going to be playing. Technically, there's a non-zero chance he might not be playing. You just never know. But I feel like that's when you can, strike while the iron's hot, so to speak. His dynasty value is probably not going to be any lower than it is right now because he doesn't have a team. What's the actionable advice that you can give us on Evan Engram right now? My advice is see if you can get him on the cheap and pick him up, because I think whoever signs him plans on utilizing him as their number one tight end. And this is a guy that still has top 10 tight end upside. How do you feel about Evan Engram at the moment in between teams?
Yeah, like I said, he got hurt last year, but if you go back, the previous 2 years, he led the Jaguars in receptions. He's only a year removed from the previous season for having, I think, if I can remember right, like 114 receptions, like something gross. And for a tight end, that's unbelievable, right? And they obviously bring Brian Thomas in. Liam Cohen says they're going to run the offense through him, and it shows. They get rid of Christian Kirk, they get rid of Josh Reynolds, they get rid of Evan Engram. It's like, hey, man, we're going to run our offense through Brian Thomas. And just to let you know, for proof, we're going to get rid of every other single pass catcher on this offense. So we have no other options. Obviously, they got Brenton Strange there, their second-round pick from just another year ago. So with Evan Engram, with his pass catching, ability, and the fact that he's still only like 30, going to be 31. I can't remember the exact age. That's still not bad for a tight end. We're seeing guys go out there like Zach Ertz at 33, Travis Kelce at 34, still go out there and produce at the right level. And there's a couple of teams, and I'm in on Evan Engram just because you're right. There's, if anything, in Dynasty, it's all about, windows in my eyes. It's about when to buy, when to sell, when to buy, when to sell. And it's just about adjusting that value. It's why you always take best player available, right? Because it's about value. You're trying to find value. So, right, you're right. His value has decreased right now, or even say it's the same as it was when he was hurt. You can get him, say you get him for, I don't know, a late second round pick as you play in tight end premium league. The moment he signs to another team, his value is going to go up. And just imagine, like, there's teams out there that could totally utilize a tight end and utilize them at a high level. I mean, what if Evan Engram signs with the Denver Broncos? You're looking at, almost a guaranteed tight end one. What if he signs with the LA Chargers, who are also in the need for a tight end? I'm sure Evan Ingram's not going to kind of break the bank either. So I'm in on Evan Engram, a player that's shown, for a year he did in New York. He did it for 2 years in Jacksonville. So he's shown us that he could be a high-end tight end one. So for me, I'm looking at the value of Evan Engram, and anytime somebody signs in free agency, there's always a slight uptick in value. So if you buy him for a second and it's a late second, say it's like 211, 212, and then you can flip him after he signs for another 12 for a second, that, it's going to be a mid-second in 2026. You just moved up a couple spots in the draft even, or hold on to him and hope the value goes up, even further. So I like the value of Evan Engram currently right now in Dynasty Fantasy Football with the cut.
I hadn't even thought about that too. When you consider, like, the Chargers getting him, or maybe the Colts, who have been rumored to get Tyler
Warren.
Tyler Warren, thank you, out of Penn State. When you think about those two teams in particular, what happens if they go out and get Evan Engram? Because then all of a sudden, the way we think about Warren and Loveland maybe changes because those guys were expected to be first-round picks, and all of a sudden we have to reevaluate where those players are potentially going to go because that would take away a landing spot. I mean, I guess it's entirely possible that whoever signs Evan Engram still drafts a tight end on day 1 or day 2. But certainly this changes things, the way we look at rookies. And we'll find more answers to this, Rich, next week once these players start being able to, they're taken off the board and we know where they're going to be.
Couple days, just a couple days.
Couple of days, yeah.
Legal tampering on Monday.
And so then they will announce these signings, right? I mean, they won't be official, but they'll basically be announced.
Yeah, there's always one, maybe two a year where like, oh, the deal falls through when it actually comes Wednesday, the signing day. It's a very small window. Window opens up on Monday. They actually sign on, I believe, that Wednesday, if that's correct.
I think that sounds right. Yeah.
So, it's interesting. I mean, it's the reason why the NFL is $1 billion business, right? There's no dead period. You get a little bit of the summer action, then just Dynasty Hot Boy summer out there, and you're out there with your shirt off. But besides that, it's 365. You got the whole season. You got the NFL playoffs. Then you got the rookies declaring. Then you got the combine, or you get the Senior Bowl and the East West Shrine Bowl, and then you got the combine. Then you have free agency. Then you have the NFL draft. And when you play Dynasty, it's literally nonstop.
365
action.
days a year. I always say that if you love fantasy football, why not play it every single day of the year? Which is 100%. What you can do.
And being tied in and listen to your show tonight and having X and following these news, it really is just about you utilize those tools to find those windows. Again, you're just trying to find the value in players and how you can make that your team better. And making your team better isn't always trading for a player or drafting a player to put in your lineup. It's just about to get a better return down the road.
I always think that this is interesting too. When you look back on a team, maybe they take over, maybe an owner takes over a dynasty team, Rich, and it's not good. But then that team ends up, making a march through the playoffs, maybe becoming the runner-up, or maybe winning a championship in that first year. And you look back on the transactions that team made, what they did as far as trades go, and it's not always what the trade was. It's not always who they got. Sometimes it's when they made the trade, right? And if you time your trades right, you can, it's the old, who was the guy? Daryl Morey for the Houston Rockets, was a GM in the NBA for years for a lot of different teams. But the way he built that Rockets team up was he made all these trades and he would improve by like 5% or 10% on every trade. So eventually he built this team up from, I don't want to say nothing, but from something that it wasn't, there wasn't much there. And I think there's dynasty players that do that too, where if they feel like they can win every trade, and just, death by 1,000 paper cuts to the rest of the 11 owners in the league. I think if they feel like they can do that, I mean, you can win your league based on that. And now it does take effort, especially if you're coming from an orphan that is in a bad situation as far as, not a lot of picks, not a lot of capital in their team to trade, but it can be done. And I think not only do you try to win every trade, it depends when you make the trade, and it depends upon these windows, as you're saying, with value right now. Let's go to the YouTube chat right now. Mr. Bakes-A-Lot has a question on Chris Olave. Rich, I don't know if you can give this away. Where do you have him ranked among your receivers for Dynasty right now? Olave is a guy that we've talked a lot about on this show and my other shows. As a player that we're excited because we've seen him do it, right? We know that the talent is there. We know he could be successful, and yet we consider the concussions and the fact that the New Orleans quarterback position is semi-in flux right now with Derek Carr, Spencer Rattler, or maybe somebody else who's not even on the roster right now. Olave is an interesting guy in Dynasty, whether you think he is a buy right now, whether you think he's a sell right now. Where do you have him amongst your receivers right now?
Yeah, I'm looking right now. I have currently him as wide receiver 32. And for Dynasty, you might say, hey, you got a guy who is a top 13 NFL pick. He's shown you could be a high-end fantasy receiver. He's only going to be 25 when the season starts. What's the reason? Why do we have him so low? And for me, it really just comes down to his concussions, right? He's had multiple concussions. His last one didn't look too terrible, but he missed pretty much the entire rest of the season with it. So, with players like that, it's those. I'm so worried about it getting worse, and because it's not like he's under that stage where like he gets a slight concussion, he's out 3-4 games, or
maybe the season,
potentially, or his career's over. And when you talk about that 3 or 4 games, right? Like when it starts to get that bad, same thing. I'm worried about Cedric Tillman. Cedric Tillman looks like he had the most mild concussion possible. Like he barely went down. He was out for the rest of the year as well. So some players are just really prone to that. And when you talk about a player missing 3 to 4 games, almost guaranteed, 2 to 3 if he gets a concussion, that's 25% of your fantasy football season, right? Like that's 25%. So like when you invest into a player like Chris Olave, like that has to be on your mind or in your plans, right? So for me, I'm just going to go ahead and push him down in my rankings overall. I'll grab Olave when their value is there on Olave, but I would rather like go ahead and gamble on a guy like Ricky Pearsall, over Olave. I would rather gamble on Xavier Worthy, Jordan Addison, guys along those lines. Even Jerry Jeudy, I would take over Olave pretty significantly as well. So for me, it really just comes down to when a person has that kind of concussion in their back pocket, I'm going to be nervous. It's the same reason why like Tua Tagovailoa is going to slip a little bit in your Superflex drafts, because like you're like, man, he's one hit away from missing half the season, his career being over, the regular season. And it's like, those are just unnecessary risk, right? Like when I'm doing a startup, like I try to avoid unnecessary risk that I don't need to when there's more of a sure thing. And a player might have a little bit slightly higher of an upside, but even like some of those guys I mentioned, like is Olave's upside significantly higher than Jerry Jeudy's? Because I know Jerry Jeudy just finished as wide receiver 1. I'm not seeing Olave out there doing that. So it's like, for me with Olave, I like the player. I think he's very solid. Kind of does remind me a little bit of Emeka Egbuka. So for me, like I have him what some might consider too low, but like those are factors you have to play when you're playing Dynasty. Because like, what's the cost versus the reward of a player like Chris Olave?
So suffice it to say, you are not going out and making offers to the Olave owner in your league right now because you feel like he probably values Olave more than you would.
It depends. Well, it depends. If I owned Olave, I told you how much I value him. So It really depends. Like, it depends. It also depends where my team structure is, right? Like, hey man, like I'm just trying to rebuild here. I'm just trying to get younger. And the risk reward on Chris Olave, like if I trade a veteran for him because I'm trying to get younger and he gets hurt and my team's already rebuilding, it's not end of the world. And I'm getting a veteran off my roster anyway. So it really depends on my team structure, right? Like, and where I'm at. Like, I'm definitely not trading for Olave now. Like, what's the point of what's the point of taking all the risk on Olave and he gets a concussion week 1 and you have no idea? And again, now would I trade for Olave for the right price? Yeah, of course. Like that's why it's kind of hard to get those vacuum questions, right? Like, who would you trade Olave for? Well, like it's kind of a moot point, right? Because every league it's its own individual league, And I talk about this on my show all the time. I hate it when you put stuff out there on Twitter, X, or wherever you put out, and like, hey man, I just traded this for this, and people are like, well, oh, you could have got this player or this player, and you're like, dude, no, I could not have got that player. The person who owns that player has zero interest in trading them. So it really comes down to in your leagues. It's another important part about Dynasty is like you have to know your league and its structure and the owners and what they're doing in there because you're navigating your ecosystem of your Dynasty league. And that's what it works with. Like I can get, one player for this value, put on X, and everybody's like, oh my God, you stole him. You know what I mean? But they don't know the concept of that player's team. Sometimes you have player teams they're literally just trying to get players off their roster, like just trying to get them off anything. Hey man, I'm putting Joe Mixon out there for the best offer, and the best offer you got was a second. And you're like, well, dude, I'm trying to get 1-1 because I want Ashton Genty. You know what I mean? Like, so he's got to go. I know I'm losing, but in Dynasty, like, it's my biggest selling point when I even talk about Dynasty. I was like, you're excited to lose in Dynasty. Like it's the one, it's the one format in fantasy where like. People will pay, say, a $200 buy-in. People will pay their $200 buy-in knowing they have a 0.0% chance to win, right? And there's rules in place to make sure people don't lose on purpose. They don't want to have them taken. So, like, it really does depend on what league you're in and how it's going to go about and where that value comes in. Because that's where it is. Because value is always in the eyes of the beholder, right? Like, it all depends how much the person that owns that player values that player. You can't tell me something, send me an offer and say, oh, that's a fair trade. That's more. then do the worst thing imaginable. Send me a screenshot of a trade calculator saying, look, this says you win by 0.5 points. It's like, bro, I don't care. My name is not trade calculator. Like this hurts my team, or I value him more. I'm a believer. So it really does come down to like, who do you love? Who do you not love? And guys like Chris Olave, Tua Tagovailoa, it really just depends on my team, where my team is at, and what's the cost, right? Because again, it just comes down to what you just said, value. What's the value? So what's the risk versus the return?
I think that's the other thing too, Rich, is you can lose a trade, but still improve your team too, because everything is relative to what your team is and what league you are in. Like, okay, I'll throw this out. Mr. Bakeslot, we're going to talk about this in a second. He throws out Chris Olave versus Christian Kirk, Chris Olave versus Khalil Shakir. That it could be a different answer in different leagues, right? Because you don't know how the current owner values them. If we look at Dynasty Rich's ranks on dynastynerds.com, and I know you probably did not update them since this Christian Kirk trade today, which we'll get into a second. Would you rather have in a vacuum? And I know you don't like questions like this, but
I like vacuum questions all the time.
Well,
I just want to preface it by saying you just give your own analysis on this.
Right.
But again, every dynasty league is its own ecosystem. So that's just our opinions.
Right. Exactly. Which is what we're doing like this. And you offer your opinions on X. I've seen a ton of people ask you questions on trades, players, or whatever. You always respond like, well, this is how I have them. And for anybody who's curious, they can go to dynastynerds.com, check out your rankings, and find out exactly how you have these guys listed. Do you have Chris Olave? I should say next time you do your roster, your rankings updates, will you have Chris Olave ahead of Christian Kirk? Will you have Chris Olave ahead of the newly rich man in Buffalo, Khalil Shakir? How would you rank those three guys when it comes to Kirk, Shakir, and Olave at the moment, off the top of your head?
I would take Olave ahead of both of them. Kirk easily. I mean, Kirk's at the back end of his career. He was fine. He was always just fine. He had that one really good year in Jacksonville, his very first year there. And that was pretty much it. Because when he signed that deal, I was like, what a ridiculous deal he just got. But that's free agency as a whole. So I won't have him ahead of Christian Kirk. I'd rather just gamble on Chris Olave. And I'm not gonna have him ahead of Khalil Shakir, despite Shakir's new deal. I mean, I think Shakir finished right around like wide receiver 36 last year. Wide receiver, so like the lowest wide receiver 3 possible. And to me, that was Shakir at like his peak essentially, because like he was the offense. Dalton Kincaid was not involved like we thought it was. Just came out this week from the combine that Kincaid was hurt all year, and that's why he wasn't able to play at a high level. Keon Coleman, somebody you took with the 33rd pick, is on that roster as well. So you expect him to take a step forward. And, I have a source inside Buffalo, and they told me, they're like, listen, we don't expect anything out of Keon Coleman this year. We run
for 2025, they don't expect
for 2025. Yeah.
Wow.
For 2025. They said, our offense it's real intricate. It's real tough to pick up. That's what we like, I forgot who they told me. I can't remember if they said Gabe Davis picked it up pretty well or not. But he's like, he's like, no offense to Keon. He's like, but like, I don't anticipate Keon picking up everything we need to pick up here for the 2024 season. If I said 25.
Oh, he's okay. Like, so this season he should factor more in, is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's what I meant. So okay. I apologize. He said 2024, and he told me at the time, which I was ecstatic about. He's like, our plan is to run our offense through Kincaid. Like that's our plan. Like he'll be our first look. And I guess he was just banged up, so it didn't work out that way. So for me, again, I'd rather just go ahead and bank on Chris Olave. Like he's got a much higher ceiling. Like, yeah, the risk is there, but like the risk, like it's not that great. Like again, what are we doing, and what game are we playing? Like we're playing a game that we're trying to win championships. Like Christian Kirk doesn't give me the best chance to win a championship. Like I don't even care if he has a good year out there with the Texans this year. Like they still have Nico Collins. He's still the clear number one. I wouldn't be surprised if they still draft a guy as well this year and bring a receiver in that way, a younger guy in there, and then grab another guy the year after that. I don't think Christian Kirk's a long-term answer there. And Khalil Shakir, I think he is what he is. Where you got him in your dynasty rookie draft, home run. Way to go. You know what I mean? You got somebody you can put in your lineup in a flex spot as your wide receiver 3. But, if you want to win a championship, your wide receiver 3 needs to be a wide receiver 2. So not a wide receiver 3. So that's it. And that same thing. Like if I had Khalil Shakir, like the moment he signs that that extension, like I'm putting him on the trade block just to see. Not saying I'm trying to get rid of him 100%, but like, again, when there's news on players, like when Saquon Barkley signed that extension with Philadelphia, I immediately just put him on my trade block. On every league that I have him, I put him on my trade block just to see. It doesn't mean I even want to trade him, but you never know when somebody else is going to overreact to news. It's the same thing like free agency. People overreact to free agency, not realizing these people are free agents for a reason, right? Like you don't see many people leaving free agency and go out and have these great fantasy football careers. It does not happen very often. NFL doesn't usually let talent walk. So does it mean I'm a trade Saquon Barkley? No, but if like somebody's going to overpay me, and give me,
then you will.
Yeah.
Then
Oh, hey, I'm going to give you 1.5 in Drake London. Okay. Because then at 1.5, I'm just go ahead and draft a running back. And now I got a receiver on a points per game basis that's hopefully not too far off from Saquon. You know what I mean? Like, so for me, I'm always using those kind of the news of people getting contracts, people getting cut. Like we mentioned, Evan Engram signing with new teams. I'm always just trying to manage expectations of that player's value and kind of seeing what my league thinks of them. Right. And like, and listen, and that's good for leagues. Like a healthy league is going to have chit chat. It's going to have trades. It's going to have, and it's part of the fun of playing Dynasty in the first place. Like I was talking about, I think this was with Garrett earlier when we did our nerd show. It's like, sometimes like just putting people out there and just negotiating, right? Like the deal doesn't get done. Like you don't fall through, hey, we're too far off on value. Sometimes just the dealing and talk about players' value and trying to work on trades. It's a fun part of Dynasty, right? Like, okay, cool. Like I understand where you're coming from. You get to again, when you're dealing with that trade where it doesn't get done, you are getting to know your league mate a little bit too, right? You're communicating, you're talking. Other conversations might come up because of that too. Like, oh, who knows how that come up? But like, you're also getting another gauge of how that person values maybe that player, certain players, how they make trades. And like, those are like little tidbits of information you want. Cause we mentioned earlier, like Eric, you want to know your league mates. Like you do. Cause if you know, every time that Eric likes to overreact to a running back signing somewhere else or a backup running back who gets an opportunity, like he'll overpay because he thinks he's going to be good. Like now I know that. And sometimes it's just having that information, that little tidbit of information in your back pocket, and you're the first to act, that can get it done. How many people out there listening have seen a trade go through in their league and they go, oh, what the heck? I would have gave more than that. Yep. I would have gave more than that. Well, you didn't offer anything. You're not being active. And again, that's why like Dynasty Nerds, like we build the tools. I didn't mention earlier, we have the Dynasty GM app. It's an app. It's free in your app store. It's built. We have a big update coming here very soon. I think people are going to love it. We're going to people are going to love it. There's going to be even more into it, but like we have a tool out there that's going to help navigate your Dynasty teams. Right. And it can put all your teams in one platform. So like my FFPC, it's a partner. We've been partners with FFPC for 4 years, and they're in our app. Sleeper, Flea Flicker, all ESPN, like you put all these leagues in there. We have the tools to help you find that value too, right? To kind of expedite it, like show you everybody's value and what their weaknesses and where their strengths are. To kind of expedite those trades, because again, you want to be the first to act, right? Like, hey man, Najee Harris just signed with this team. And he signed a 4-year deal. Most of it's through guys who signed a steal. I don't really believe in this. I want to get rid of Najee. I jump on the Dynasty GM app real quick. Boom. Who needs a running back? Instead of going through every single roster, it's right there in front of my eyes. Oh, okay. Eric needs a running back. He does. He's really strong at receiver. I need a receiver. Oh, he's really strong at draft picks. Like maybe he has 2-1 this year. I'll take 2-1 for Najee. So again, it's just about being reactionary, being proactive. I always say if you're stagnant in a dynasty league and you're not making moves or doing anything, you're just gonna get passed up. Because it's really hard to build a team when you're just drafting one first-round pick every single year. When you're a contender, it's great. But like if you're trying to rebuild and you're trying to build a roster that way and you have the 1-1, but then you only have the 2-1, like it's hard to build. Like it takes a while that way. Like you have to be making moves. You have to be making trades. It's literally part of the game. Like it's hard to see teams that are like 10 years into the league, or say even 5 years, I'm going to go 10 years, that are just naturally doing it that way. It's the teams that you look at that made the trades, that drafted well, that got extra draft picks. That's how'd you get that super team? Well, I blew my team up and made the right moves. I got all the right draft picks. I was loaded up in 2024. Now I got Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Brian Thomas, Slad McConkey, Brock Bowers, Bucky Irvin. Like, I'm ready to go.
You're fast forwarding the rebuilding process when you can do that. You're fast forwarding through it.
Yeah, 100%.
That app is the Dynasty Nerds GM, and it is available in the App Store as well as Google Play, right, Rich?
Yeah, anywhere you can find an app, we will be there. I said, we make sure Dynasty Nerds is like, if you have a cell phone and you're looking at something, Dynasty Nerds is going to be there.
Mr. Bakes a lot to follow up on this Olave discussion. He's on the clock in a tight end premium dynasty startup right now. He is considering Chris Olave. He's also considering Travis Kelce and George Kittle. Now, we know Travis Kelce's best football is behind him. You could probably make a strong case that George Kittle's is as well. Chris Olave, I'm not sure. If you, again, this is a question that, like, it would probably depend upon what the rest of his team look like. But right now, how would you value these players if you're doing an overall rankings?
Yeah,
or would you have him in a tight end premium dynasty between Olave, Kittle, and Kelce?
If I'm Mr. Bakes, I am snapping that George Kittle draft in a tight end premium. I am all over that. I want nothing to do with Kelce. You're right. He's at the end of his rope. I wouldn't be surprised if this upcoming year is his last year. George Kittle is only going to be 31 years old. Like I mentioned, tight ends, he does not look washed whatsoever. No. It looks like you're going to get at least 2 to 3 more years. There's already rumors that the 49ers want to extend him. When Deebo Samuel's off the field, he averages over 18 points per game. He's in pretty much the tier 2. I mean, I guess technically it should be Brock Bowers in tier 1 by himself, Trey McBride in tier 2 by himself, but George Kittle is in that tier 3. And I'm a big proponent, definitely in tight end premium. Like, you want one of those top 5 guys, right? Because from 6 to 15, there's literally no difference between those players usually at tight end. So Kittle is a true championship caliber difference maker. I would trade Olave for Kittle in a tight end premium league and hope that gets it done. But now that Deebo has left the picture, Ayuk's coming off his ACL injury. We don't even know if he's going to start the year 100% healthy. They got Ricky Pierce, who I like. They got Juwan Jennings, who's nice as well. But you would totally expect George Kittle still be the focal point of that offense. So absolutely love Kittle there over Olave easily. And then I would take Olave. Then I would take Kelce. Kelce falls in the category, like, I would trade for him if I'm a contender, if I can get him for like dirt cheap, like dirt cheap. Because you got to remember, the biggest downfall that started for Travis Kelce was actually last year, and that was the addition of Rashee Rice. Because Rashee Rice eats on those short intermediate passes, and then he dominates after the catch. And that's where Kelce's always ate. So when you saw Kelce take a step back last year, it was really because of Rashee Rice. Now you have the addition of Xavier Worthy to this offense as well. And I would not be surprised if the Chiefs, they're gonna bring in a young running back. They're probably gonna draft one. Wouldn't be surprised if they took a guy in the first round, even if there's somebody they love there, a guy like Trevian Henderson or Mario Hampton. And it wouldn't surprise me that they drafted a tight end as well. They grabbed one of these guys to try and grab a replacement for Kelce, a guy like Harold Fannin in the 3rd round out of Bowling Green, right? And it's a very strong tight end class. You can get guys even later, outside of Colston Loveland, Tyler Warren, you have Gunnar Helm out there. You got Harold Fannin. So
Elijah Arroyo
out of Miami.
Mason Taylor's another one. Yeah, you're totally right on that.
100%. Yeah. So there's a very good chance that Kelce's replacement is going to come through this draft next year. Kelce retires after 2025, and then at tight end 1 in Kansas City, which we know that's going to work in that offense. So, yeah, that's how I'd rank them.
I would say too that the thing with Kelce is, Rich, I don't know how you feel about this. I should call all my team names the bag holder, because when it comes to veterans, I almost never punt on them. I always feel like, it's the opposite case in the NFL. I feel like a lot of the great teams in the NFL, a lot of the great GMs will get rid of a guy 1 year early rather than 1 year late. I am the exact opposite in Dynasty, sometimes to my own detriment, but sometimes it works out. And I feel like it's been working out for me more than it has not been. But these veterans, I always feel like I'm not going to get the right compensation. I tried to do it with Alvin Kamara and Joe Mixon last year. And Mixon, I ended up getting Trey Benson for him. We'll see. The jury's still out on that. But Alvin Kamara, I just never found a good deal that I wanted, where I feel like I was like just giving up too much in exchange for not a lot. Kamara, Kelce is another one. I always bring back the Hines Ward discussion, where people thought that guy was washed, and then he turns out like another 4 or 5 years on a lot of my dynasty rosters where he was a wide receiver 2, and maybe a wide receiver 1 of those years as well. So I'm always I feel like in dynasty leagues, at least in the dynasty leagues I play in, Rich, like everybody's all about youth. Everybody's all about, the next big thing rather than holding on to the big thing. And I feel like it served me well over the years. Now, eventually, like Tyler Lockett was on a bunch of my dynasty. Well, not a bunch, but he was on several of my dynasty teams. I don't know what's going to happen with him, but I know he's probably not going to be a difference maker this year. And I'm caught holding him, right? And I never traded him. And I'm good with that. How do you feel about that when you have veterans like this on your team where you should probably get out on them, but at the same time, you got to find somebody in your league that's willing to deal something of fair value for them, and that doesn't always happen.
Yeah, I mean, just really, it kind of comes down to where your team is. Like, I'm a huge proponent of, trading my first round picks when I'm a contender for players to have about 2 to 3 years left that I anticipate, like 2, which is a lifetime, right? And if you do that and you keep doing that, like, it's how you can maintain a championship caliber team for a very long time, right? Like, I was saying that I trade Joe Mixon 3 years ago for a first, and I got him everywhere for a first. And since I did that, he had 3 straight years of running back 1 numbers, not obviously up until last year. And there's value in it. So it really, again, Eric, it really just comes down to where my team is. If I'm competing, yeah, I'm buying veterans. It's kind of like, like the sneaky maneuver, right? Like, you can always just go out and trade for a Joe Mixon, a Chuba Hubbard right now, even a Derrick Henry, like these old players. If you want an older receiver right now, you go out there and trade for that player. A Terry McLaurin, very available for a decent price. I gave him a first round pick last year to go make my push for him. He was wide receiver 1. I think wide receiver like 7 overall. So yeah, I love it too, man. Like, there's value in those veterans as well. And people are like, oh, he's only got 2 years left. Like, what is the life expectancy of most fantasy, like the output of fantasy football players at a high level, right? Like, a 2-year window is really good. If you hit on a running back and it gives you 2 years of production, that's a home run. And, I would challenge everybody, if you really want to look at it, just go back to your league and go back 2 years ago. So go back to 2023 and look at everybody's rosters. Look how drastically different they all look compared to they are to today too. Like, you play Dynasty for the long-term value, but you're living in these windows of championship windows. And that's usually like a 2 to 3 year window is what you're living in. So 2 to 3 years is your whole window to win a ship anyways. Like, you don't have these long windows out there competing. Some people can, right? Because they drafted so well and they get these young power super teams, but you never know when the wheels are going to fall off or when like injuries are going to happen. You have no idea. You could have the 2 best. You could have Christian McCaffrey and Breece Hall going into this year, and you feel really good about it. Really good about it. And then when it's all said and done, the year's over. It's like, wow, I didn't get anything out of that. I didn't get anything in return. So just because something looks good on paper doesn't mean it's going to translate to championships. And I say all the time, like, I'm looking to win titles. I am not looking to win paper championships, which everything looks good on paper. I'm not trying to think about 3 years down the road. Like, if I'm in a window, like if I'm in that window, and you kind of mentioned this earlier, I want to circle back on that. You're like, people are like, oh, they just want to win a trade. Again, I tell everybody on my show all the time, let the losers worry about winning trades,
yes,
and let the winners worry about winning ships.
Titles. Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right?
Right. Yeah.
Like, people are like, oh, you gave up a first for that guy. Well, if that guy gave me a championship, then that was a home run pick, right? Like, I don't care. Like you said before, it depends on what your team's value is. And they don't want to lose a trade. You have, and again, it's where your team is at. But if you're in a championship caliber window, you don't want to lose a trade by a lot. You don't want to get bent over on a trade, but you have to be willing to lose a trade when you're in a window. You have to, because if the trade makes your team better and your starting lineup better and you have a better chance to win a championship because of that trade, you make the move. You make the move.
I think that, we talk about 2 to 3 year windows, which I think is correct. And I think I look at it through that frame of mind. But at the same time, Rich, it's like things change so quickly on a year-to-year basis. Sometimes I feel like it's a fool's errand to look 3 years ahead, right? Because things change so fast. A team can look really, really good, and a year later, all of a sudden, like, oh my God, this team is real. Bill Wonky, who is a longtime FFPC player, I had him on the Road of his High Stakes Lowdown on Tuesday night, and we were talking about this, about how good a team or how bad a team can look. 1 year, and then you fast forward 1 year, and then all of a sudden, oh my goodness, this team looks unbelievable with minimal changes to it, or this team looks awful just because of injuries or whatever. Like, things change so fast. So I think like 2 to 3 years, I think you're right. But sometimes I feel like I don't even know if I'm talented enough to look that far ahead in dynasty fantasy football. Like, because it changes so fast.
It does, and you're just trying to get there, and you're trying to get into like once you made the playoffs, now you have a chance. Like, I could show you a lineup that I have that is I just won back-to-back championships in the league. If I showed you the other team in that league, again, they blew up their team, they rebuilt it, and they rebuilt a monster. Like, if I showed you this guy's team, you would say, how does this guy first of all, even last year, he came in third place last year. But how does that person not win a championship every single year? Like, and you look at my roster and like, wait, you won a championship with that roster? Like, even sometimes I'm like, yeah, I won a champion. Like, didn't expect it, but here I am, back-to-back champ. You know what I mean? But you put our rosters next to each other, compared to each other. Like, that team would smoke that team. Well, back-to-back years, I'm a champion. He's not. You know what I mean? I got the title on Sleeper. I got the gold trophy next to me. Like, kudos to me. So it's like, it's just about getting there and then putting yourself in the best position to give yourself a chance, right? Because you don't know when the other player's going to put up a dud. Oh, great. Oh, no. He's got Drake London, Amon-Ra, and Brock Bowers. And then they all put up, like, bad games in week 17. Right. Like, okay, everybody does it.
It happens. It definitely happens. I do want to I want to get back to this Christian Kirk thing. Let's talk about it from the Houston Texans standpoint. Rich, Christian Kirk is the exact definition of the type of receiver I don't want on my dynasty rosters. There are going to be people who look at this deal and they're like, okay, Texans have a proven guy here next to Nico Collins. They have Dalton Schultz, but whatever. Tank Dell, it may not even play in 2025. This probably means they're not re-signing Stephon Diggs. So Kirk is going to be the guy. He's going to be the second guy next to Collins catching passes from CJ Stroud. I don't like having guys like this who, I don't know how old he's going to be, 29 maybe. I don't like having guys like this with limited upside on my dynasty rosters. I want to have the guys that have the upside of being a top 12 receiver. Christian Kirk, as far as I can see, does not have the capability of being a top 12 receiver for the rest of his career. That means I am willing to move off him, and I'm willing to take less than 100 cents on the dollar if somebody wants to give me that. Kirk gets traded for a 7th-round pick instead of being cut by the Jaguars, which is where he was destined to be. I have Kirk on some dynasty teams right now, and I'll be honest with you, Rich, I don't know if I'm going to find any value from him, and this is probably a guy when I get to roster cutdowns in those dynasty leagues, I'm probably just going to cut him because I don't want to reserve players on my roster for mediocre upside, which is what I'm seeing from Kirk.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't cut him, you know what I mean? But like,
I might have to. Like here's what it comes down to. When you compare, and I know we're not going to get into rookie receivers a ton tonight, but like if you have a guy who has day 2 draft capital as a rookie this year, would you rather have him or would you rather have Christian Kirk? And I know I'm talking in very vanilla terms here, but like by and large, I want to have that guy, the unknown, the mystery box guy on my team if it comes down to him or Christian Kirk. Because I don't see a pathway for fantasy goodness for Christian Kirk. I feel like with Kirk, he's like a bye week fill-in guy, but in a pinch, I can start him, but I'm never going to want to start Christian Kirk. That's the way I feel about it.
No, I mean, you're going to really need Nico to go down with an injury like he did last year to really get true good value out of Kirk. And then he could probably be a true number 1, but even put him back to his like Arizona days where he's pretty much just like a number 2. He's just a Jag. That's all he is. And yeah, I mean,
not anymore. Now he's a Tex.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
Thank you. That's your dad joke of the day.
Love it.
No, but keep going with Kirk in this conversation.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, and that just comes down to us. I wouldn't cut him, but again, all my dynasty rosters are 30-man rosters with taxi squads.
Then I wouldn't cut him. I would not cut him.
They have 2-year windows on. So it really does depend. But yeah, I mean, yeah, of course, like he really is like a roster clogger that you're only starting in desperation. And again, kind of goes back to like, if you're starting Christian Kirk outside of that Nico injury, you're not winning a championship. So it comes down to, yeah, I have no problem cutting it. And sometimes like you see people that cut a guy and they pick him up and you're like, some people have that too. Like they have the FOMO of like, oh yeah, man, I don't want to drop him because somebody else is going to pick him up. Like, who cares? I hope he picks him up, and I hope he starts him. I hope he starts him versus me. You know what I mean? But then again, knowing my luck, he'd start him versus me and he'd go off for 36 points and I lose in a playoff game to Christian Kirk. But
Paul Charchian calls that the sabotage drop, where you drop a guy and you hope your opponent picks him up and starts him against you.
Yeah.
Because you don't think he's going to do anything. So there's that as well. Okay. I want to wrap this up just with a Jaguars conversation in general. Today they traded Christian Kirk and they cut Evan Engram. Does this do anything for Brian Thomas's value, dynasty value, or was it so high to begin with? This is just like a drop in the bucket. It doesn't change anything.
Yeah, it's already as high as it. I mean, it's as high as this. Doesn't mean anything whatsoever. He's coming off a wide receiver 1 year as a rookie. Liam Cohen took the head coach job. The offense coordinator said they're going to run their offense through Brian Thomas. He looked absolutely fantastic. It doesn't do anything whatsoever. All it does is just make you more happy to own Brian Thomas. That's it. It's what a home run rookie pick that you got there. And he probably went like very late first or high second in your rookie drafts too. So what a home run pick. Doesn't change his value whatsoever. He's already looked upon like sky high. Like he's getting drafted. I just did we did something for the site startup league, and it went Marvin Harrison Jr. And then right in the second round it was like 210. And at 211, Brian Thomas went right after him. And I'm the one that took Marvin Harrison Jr. at 210. And that's why I know, because I was debating. I was like, oh, man, I just got one Brian Thomas share. Like, where do I go here?
So what was the reasoning behind that with taking Harrison over Thomas? Just curiously.
The tape, the college tape, the analysis. Okay. I don't spend all my time studying tape and breaking down film. And grading out prospects to let something like that just drastically change me, like opinion. Like, and listen, it was really close. Like, I was thinking about it. You know what I mean? Like, I was thinking to prove an asset, but like, another misconception is like, oh, Marvin Harrison had a bad year. Like, he had 900 receiving yards as a rookie, and the threshold for success is 500 yards. Like, as long as you have 500 yards, there's still, as a rookie, there's still a very good chance that you could be a wide receiver 1. So I'm going to stick with my tape evaluation on Marvin Harrison Jr., which I graded out significantly better than Brian Thomas, and I'm gonna go that route. So it's a gamble that I might end up regretting, but it was a gamble I was willing to take at that time. But if I would have been 2 drafts at the same time, I would have taken Brian Thomas with the other pick.
Right, exactly, because that's how close they were. Let me throw this at you. Marvin Harrison in 2024 had a bad year because of what people expected of him, which was Rich, maybe a little too much. In redraft leagues last year, Marvin Harrison, in some of the leagues I was playing in, was like a 1-2 turn type player. And that is setting the bar awfully high. And I feel like the people who draft, well, not necessarily the people who draft them that high, just fantasy players in general. You look at what they were expecting this year, and you who've been doing this forever can tell me like, hey, listen, if you were expecting like this banner Randy Moss, insane rookie season from Marvin Harrison, then yeah, you probably think he had a bad year. But in the grand scheme of things, if we just look at him as a first round rookie receiver, his year wasn't all that bad.
No, not at all. Over 900 yard receiving. I mean, he's a clear number 1 receiver there. They're in a year where now they have got to win, right? Like, Jonathan Gannon, like, if he doesn't win this year, he's probably going to lose his job. Yeah. So they're in a big spot here. They got to figure out how to utilize Marvin Harrison to get his full potential. But yeah, he had a very solid rookie year. It just wasn't, we've been so spoiled in Dynasty with these rookie classes. These guys come, and we did again, Lad McConkey.
Past year. Yeah.
Yeah. McConkey. Well, to be fair, this last year was one of the best rookie classes. I've been playing Dynasty for 22 years. This was probably the best rookie class I've ever seen.
McConkey, Neighbors, Bowers, Harrison, Thomas, right. For God's sake. The list goes on. Bucky Irving was insanely good. Tyrone Tracy.
All of the quarterbacks. Like, you're happy with every single quarterback. Even if you have JJ McCarthy, like, you're still happy because he plays in Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell, who made Sam Darnold look great, Nick Mullins look good. So yeah, I mean, from a super flex standpoint, it's fantastic. And Xavier Worthy showed you enough where you're pretty happy with that. Yep. With him as well. obviously
he was honestly, Rich, he was one of my, I did not like Xavier Worthy coming into Dynasty rookie draft season. And I picked him in a few drafts just like as a FOMO type guy. And I'm thrilled with it. I'm really glad I have him on my roster now.
Yeah. I mean, I like this table. I always thought, cause like anytime I see a guy come in there and run that kind of speed, like to me, it's like, oh, that guy will never be good. Like they're not
because he's going to be typecast as a speed guy or why?
No, I mean, just like historically, those guys are in the top 10 for 40s for receivers. They're never. Oh, okay. Yeah. They're track guys. They're not football guys. Like they're track guys. But like Xavier Worthy was one of the few people I watched. I'm like, well, this guy's more than a track guy. Like he can run some routes. He's got decent hands. A lot of those guys are just fast. Either they're fast and they can't catch, or they're fast and they can't run routes. Right. Like, so it's like, or it's a mixture of both of those guys. And I thought Xavier Worthy did not fit that. Well, he's like one of the first like super, super fast guys that I love, but it's not like, I think Brian Thomas ran a super fast 42. So it's not like it's anything crazy there, but yeah, Xavier Worthy, you know, in a great spot. He did better than I thought he would this year as well.
Oh, especially at the end of the season too. I mean, he was the guy on that Chiefs offense. Mason Spain just chiming in with a big trade. I love that deal where you give up McConkey, you get Harrison, Michael Pittman, and Brian Robinson back. Kudos to you, Mason. The one thing I do want to bring up in the YouTube chat here, and I know we're up against it, but I'm going to bring this up from Bill Hollywood. He thinks that the Cardinals are going to draft a wideout early. Maybe Ted McMillan, maybe somebody on day 2, whatever. If that happens, Rich, does that actually help or hurt Marvin Harrison's dynasty stock? Or does it not affect it much?
Again, I strongly disagree with that take. Like strongly disagree with that take. I do not think they're going to draft a receiver high. They have a younger guy they already invested in, Michael Wilson there, who's just fine. They have their true number 2 is their tight end. They have Trey McBride, so they don't need. It's not like they're short there. And like I said before, this is a team that has to win now. So I would imagine how deep this defensive line class is, that they're going to really start digging into the trenches there and build a team way. And it's a weak wide receiver class anyways. I think they might grab a guy late. They might sign a guy in free agency, bring a guy in super cheap, like even a guy like who gets cut like this past week, who knows? But so I strongly disagree. But say they did draft a guy in the first. Yeah, I would. I mean, yeah.
Or even day 2,
Yeah, day 2 doesn't worry me as much. But I mean, they took Marvin Harrison with the top 10 pick, right? Like he's the clear investment here. They gotta win. He's gonna be the guy. I don't think it hurts too much because they also have Trey McBride as well. So like it's so hard for me like to talk. Yeah, of course it would hurt a little bit, but like I don't think that's gonna happen in the slightest bit whatsoever. Like not early. Like maybe they take one guy in the 3rd round, but again, for how like I wouldn't be surprised if they go defense. And again, I don't know how their offensive line ranks either. So they go in the trenches there. It's not the best offensive line, but for how deep this defensive line class is, you can take a guy in the 1st and then get another very good quality guy in the 2nd and kind of rebolster that line. Cause like, I know we play fantasy, but the way to win a Super Bowl, outside of having like obviously an elite quarterback, it's in the trenches, man. Yep. It really is. It's who's got the best. If you have a really great defensive line and it's dominant, like it doesn't matter how good your quarterback is because he's going to get pressured, right? Like
this is a good trench draft too. I mean, both sides, offensive line and defensive line for sure. And I think that's probably where Arizona's lacking. They're not going to hit the backfield. It seems like they still believe in Kyler Murray. This is not a great quarterback class. You already have your tight end. You have your number 1 wide receiver. I think you focus in on the defensive side of the ball if you're Arizona. So Bill, there you go. We're going to alleviate those concerns with Marvin Harrison right now. I'll tell you what else we're going to do. We have to step out, catch our breath, and come back after this break. When we do, Rich, I want to get deep into the running backs, especially because I know you've done extensive work on this, the rookie running backs, that is. We may hit on some other veterans along the way, but I do want to talk about Dylan Sampson, Michelle Tootin. I also want to talk about the possibility, and I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, 3 rookie running backs going in the 1st round of the NFL draft. Is it 1994 already? Possibly. We'll find out. He is Rich Dotson from DynastyNerds.com. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show rolls on right after this.
Andrew Cooper here of Fantasy Alarm, and if you're anything like me, football season never ends. Super Bowl's over. Who cares? We got the combine. We got the draft. We got free agency coming up here. We got a lot of speculation to do. And the best way to take advantage of that is at myffpc.com. Mock drafts are fun. They're fine. But if you really want to get leverage, get in one of their never too early best ball drafts or never too early super flex drafts now, where you can take advantage of all your takes. I'm in there now because I got hunches, right? I got ideas for free agency. I got ideas for the drafts. I got ideas for the 2025 NFL season, and I want to get them on paper now. And I want to do so before the NFL draft, right? Before the cat's out of the bag. That's the beauty of these contests, right? You go in and you get set up, and the drafts are already going, and they end on April 24th, right when the NFL draft starts. So you can get in there, get all your takes in, take advantage of everything before everybody finds out what happens. Use promo code ALARM at myffpc.com when you get set up. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more, and you can get in these tournaments, the never too early best ball and the never too early super flex contest, to get your shot at $10,000 or $40,000 grand prizes.
The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network rolls on. I'm Eric Balkman. He is Rich Dotson at Dynasty Rich from DynastyNerds.com. Want to remind you to play in the FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball and Superflex Best Ball tournaments. You can enter for $125 and $35 respectively. Those will have a $40,000 and a $10,000 grand prize. What's the slant on this? Well, the drafts are already off and running, but they will stop before the NFL draft starts. So that will be the cutoff for these drafts. Tournaments are going to go all the way to April 24th, 30-second, 60-second, 2-hour, and 6-hour clocks at myffpc.com. That is where to go for that. And some of the rookies that are going to be drafted are some of the rookies we're going to talk about right now. Rich, let me just ask you just a blanket running back question. You just said you've been playing Dynasty for over 2 decades. Where does this running back class rank? I feel like it's being compared to I want to say the 2017 draft, the McCaffrey, Aaron Jones, Leonard Fournette, whatever. Where does it rank for you in recent drafts, just as far as the running backs go?
Yeah, see, the 2017 class is the best, but that's a hindsight the best. But this is from a scout, like from a tape wise, like watching the running backs, like this is the best class I've ever seen. Like, I mean,
really?
Yeah, like bar none, man. It's unbelievably talented.
As far as grinding tape goes, this class was better to you than that 2017 class was when you were scouting them via tape.
Yeah, nobody thought I didn't think Chris McCaffrey was going to be one of the GOATs of all time. You know what I mean? Like at the time that came out, I can't remember who the running back one was overall in that class, but
it was Fournette. I'm pretty sure it's Fournette.
Yeah, so that was the Fournette class. Yeah. So for me, yeah, this is an unbelievable class. I mean, it's amazing. Like when I go, so we do a nerd score at Dynasty Nerds. Like, so it's a pre-draft, just a film grade alone. And I know, if you have a grade over 70, then you have a good chance to be a solid NFL fantasy football running back. And the most we've ever had over 70 is 6. We have 12 currently. Running backs right now over 70 grades of 70. And the nerd score has been unbelievably successful too. So like, again, when I talk about the tools that we have at Dynasty Nerds help you win, we're actually adding a new tool to it. It's called the Nerd Score Plus, which we're going to evaluate like the draft capital and their landing spots afterwards. But the nerd scores outproduced NFL draft capital. So our film study has actually done better than NFL GMs. It's, again, this is just facts. You know what I mean? So like we've had a really, it's when I say it's our bread and butter, breaking down these rookies and giving you advice on rookies on our podcast, it's our number one. Like we do our most numbers that time as well. Even people that hate on us, if they're like, oh yeah, well I like the rookie stuff. Like I hate Rich, but I really like his rookie stuff. And this rookie class, like I watch these guys, Eric, one after the other, and I'm like, this guy's nice. Like this guy is like a nice player. And like for example, there's a player out there that he didn't even get invited to the combine. Like wasn't invited to the combine, but if you listen to our podcast, you can hear about these kind of guys where, like I said, where everybody else says go left, we're going to tell you to go right. But a guy who doesn't even get invited to the combine, he's usually when Garrett makes a show sheet for how we're going to break down these running backs, players, like when you get to the end of the show sheets, like when the turds are, kind of wrap up the show with some turds, flush the toilet. But like, there's a guy, his name's Antario Brown out of Northern Illinois. And, he wasn't even invited to the combine. He's going to be extremely, like, he's probably going to go undrafted in a lot of like your rookie drafts, but He's a running back out of Northern Illinois that dominated Notre Dame, who had an unbelievable defense, dominated Notre Dame, and he looks pretty good on tape. Again, I'm not saying this guy is go take him in the second round of your rookie draft because you won't have to. You're going to get him in a fourth round of your rookie draft. His name is Ontario Brown out of Northern Illinois. I mean, he's got the quickness. He makes lateral cuts like no tomorrow. Like he's got like really, really loose ankles. But like, here's another example. Like I watched these running backs. We just did 12 on this past show. There's only 3 I really didn't like. Like I thought like Woody Marks was just okay. Khalil Mullins out of Michigan, I thought he was not worth drafting. But this draft is loaded with upside to the point of where like I'm going to let they're all so close. When I say we have like 12 guys over 70, so we're talking about like 0.3 points or 0.2 points that differentiates these players and on a film score. So it really going to come down to like, okay, where do they land in NFL draft? Mm-hmm. And this draft class, Eric, couldn't come at a better time. There's 9 teams out there that need a 3-down running back right now. 9 teams, you know what I mean? And I just mentioned we have 12 guys that we have like with really good grades. 9, and there's gonna be other teams that go out there and win with a tandem. Like there's guys like Jordan James out of Oregon. If you pair him up with a guy like Derrick Henry, he's still a very valuable fantasy football player out there. So I absolutely love this class. Like it's unbelievable. Like putting the tape in and just seeing one guy after the other saying, "Yeah, I want to draft him. I want him on my dynasty roster."
I want to clarify this for myself and for the viewers. You have 12 running backs in this year's class that grade out with the Dynasty Nerds score that you guys have, the Dynasty Nerds model, a 70 or above, which means they have a really good shot of being a good NFL running back, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, previous years, you guys have done this. The most you've ever had 70 plus in one draft was 6,
yes. Right?
And do you remember what year that was offhand or no?
I would have to look it up.
Okay. You don't have to look it up.
Okay.
But I want to bring this up too. 2017, that NFL draft class. And Rich already pointed this out. Hindsight, 2020, it looks awesome. But these were the running backs in that 2017 draft class. Leonard Fournette, Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, Kareem Hunt, Deontay Foreman, who, whatever, he was okay for a few times, for a few stints in the league. James Conner, Samaje Perine, Tariq Cohen, and Aaron Jones. Never heard of that guy. He was also in that draft as well. By the way, I'll say this too, to your point. I have heard a lot of people talking about, hey, maybe this is the year to double up on running backs if you're an NFL team because of how deep this class is. And maybe if you need one guy, you just go and throw 2 darts at it. The Green Bay Packers in 2017 needed a running back. They drafted 3 of them that year. They drafted Jamal Williams in the 4th. They drafted Aaron Jones in the 5th. And then they drafted Devontae Mays in the 7th. Now, it's debatable whether Jamal Williams worked out. I happen to think it did for fantasy. Aaron Jones definitely worked out that year for fantasy. But I've been bringing this up a lot, Rich. A lot of these teams, and this is where the dynasty people should perk up their ears, a lot of people who are holding these running backs on their teams that maybe their situation looks really good right now, man, that can fall over in a split second on day 2 of the NFL draft, perhaps even early on day 3. I think that's the thing that we need to understand here. If you have all these veteran running backs on your teams, or you have several running backs on your teams that are veterans, you need to understand that their value might be as high as it's going to be right now. I don't know if you can get out of it or not. I don't know how you're handling it, Rich, with these running backs that are currently on NFL teams that could have their role radically changed at the end of April.
Yeah, not many running backs are safe. And I like how you mentioned that Aaron Jones, that draft, because I remember specifically during Dynasty Nerds podcast, Jamal Williams was going in the first round of rookie drafts that year because of where he went for the Packers. And I specifically said in the podcast multiple times, was like, there's no point of taking Jamal Williams in the first when you can take this running back out of UTEP, Aaron Jones, who has a much higher fantasy ceiling than Jamal Williams, in the third. You know what I mean? I do have those numbers for you too. So the score is 72, higher than 72 for the nerd score. Now, mind you, we've only been doing the nerd score since 2020. Okay. That's all we do. So this is the 6th year we're doing it. The most we had was 7 in 2023. We had 7 in 2023, 4 in 2024, 3 in 2022, 4 in 2021, and 6 in 2020. So 12 currently. 12.
I'm just looking back on, so the 2023 draft is when you had 7 of them, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that draft, as far as running backs go, we'd have to go back. This was 2 years ago, essentially now, if we're including the 2025 draft. That class was Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Charbonnet, but then, and Achane was in that draft too. Kendra Miller, Tyjae Spears, Roshan Johnson, Bigsby, Chase Brown. I forgot about Chase Brown in that draft. God, we need to talk about Chase Brown here real quick. And I know we're going to get to rookies here, but I want to ask you, as far as your leagues go, Rich, I have a ton of Chase Brown in a lot of my dynasty leagues because people let him fall to me, and I liked him. And it kind of worked out with Zach Moss getting hurt, and then Khalil Herbert not really offering much down the stretch. Is it smart to be out on Chase Brown? Like what should I be willing to take 85, 90 cents on the dollar? Somebody wants to offer that to me, because I know that what we saw with weeks 10 to 18 with Chase Brown, I have a hard time visualizing that for 2025.
Yeah, you're asking the wrong guy.
So you love Chase Brown. Okay.
No, complete opposite.
Oh, you hate Chase Brown. You're like, Balky, get out on him right now. This is only going to blow up in your face.
Let me say this. When I broke down his tape, like I doo-dooed all over Chase Brown. I really did. Like the other guys liked him. I didn't. I liked his speed. I liked him on the outside, in space. He's more, and listen, even though he put up decent numbers, like a lot of those are just from a couple big broken plays where he just made some big runs. For the most part, like he averages like under 4 yards per carry. Mm-hmm. I don't love his power. I don't love, like, I think when I was breaking down this film, I was like, this is a guy, like if the defensive line at the goal line was a bunch of paper bags, like he wouldn't break through the line. So I'm not like, and this is a team that I would totally expect, like, this running back class is really strong. So like a guy like Ali Gordon would look really nice next to a guy like Chase Brown, right? Mm-hmm. Like, these big running backs out there. So I would expect the Bengals to probably bring in another running back, and that's going to hurt Chase Brown. Like he did really well last year because he was the only guy there. And again, I always use an example, like if you're getting all the carries, and definitely if you can catch the football like Chase Brown can, you're going to look really good in fantasy. Like I thought his tape, he doesn't look like exceptionally great. I think it looks like he's a nice, decent running back. He outproduced my expectations from a tape evaluation, but like I don't think there's long-term value there, because once he becomes a timeshare back, his value goes down. And for me, I don't expect the Bengals not to come out of this draft with how deep this running back class is, when there's probably about 20, I think I've seen guys that I respect in the business, even guys like Brugler, say there's 31 draftable running backs, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So like the Bengals are going to come out of this draft with a guy that's going to make you somewhat like question the value of Chase Brown. So yeah, I would love to, like, I would personally, if it was me, because I didn't like the tape, going back to that evaluation, I've seen guys like this, like Mike Davis, the Atlanta Falcons, was a running back 12 because he got all the carries. He's not good. He got all the carries. So he's a running back 12. He's an
accumulator. The same way that Michael Turner kind of was too. Like, I don't like accumulator backs. And Turner was fine for like a season or two in Atlanta.
2 years. Yeah, he got two really good years. Yeah. Really good. I think it was almost like running back 1 overall, I think, his first year out.
Well, we don't see that anymore in today's NFL. Like it is a 2-headed and 3-headed monster, except for super. I mean, think about this, Rich. Bijan Robinson is what, like, I'd have to look up on Fantasy Mojo where he's being drafted right now, but I assume top 5 in redraft leagues. That dude is like even splitting time with Tyler Algier. Tyler Algier is still getting a lot of run with Atlanta. So I think it is a super rare. You are in rarefied air if you are the guy on a team. It just doesn't happen anymore in the NFL. And I think this class is going to set fire to a lot of backfields, dynasty fantasy backfields in leagues this year. What's the actionable advice? Would you encourage people to deal some of these veteran running backs to get what you can, because come the end of April, their value is going to be much lower? Or is it just like sit, hold, and pray that your backfield won't be affected by this.
No, we did a show on this like a month ago, actually, and covered this exact topic. And we said, like, we went through the running backs that were safe. You know, like there's not a lot of them they feel really super safe with. You know, James Conner falls in that category because, you know, they just drafted Trey Benson, so he's safe. You don't expect them to draft anybody in there. Obviously, Bijan Robinson safe. Devon Achane, in my eyes. I know Mike McDaniel was like getting pretty ecstatic about Trevian Henderson, but again, they just traded up. They traded up last year. They gave a 3rd round pick this year to get Jalen Wright. They got Devon Achane, so he seems pretty safe. I would say Breece Hall safe with how good Braylon Allen looked last year, and then Jahmyr Gibbs is really safe. Outside of that, I'm okay with trading every single running back possible because I think they're all most likely are going to lose. And Saquon too. Sorry, Saquon falls in that category safe, but like for the most part, they're all going to lose some value. They're all going to get a guy come to a timeshare, and but at the same time, like my dynasty philosophy is running back should always be the most fluid position on your roster.
Mm-hmm.
Like always, like there's a reason why in a startup draft you want to grab a couple of like young receivers, right? Because you plant, place, and then just grow around that because running backs, they're going to get hurt the most. And you can just literally just have them as the most fluid part on your roster. And then come playoff time or later on the road, you can trade for guys. Like you can trade for guys that are old for super cheap and then they're healthy. You get super cheap backups that people know, like say, I like a Jordan Mason, like, hey, they're only in here for a short period. I'm gonna get whatever I can and I'm out. I'm not in the playoffs. So you can get those kind of guys. So yeah, I mean, all running backs should be available. Like even a guy who just like had a fantastic year, like James Cook, right? Like I would expect the Bills to draft a running back, and they might take one, even though they take him in the second round, a decent high because they're like, hey, we're not going to pay James Cook $15 million a year, so we'll just let him play out his last year. We'll get a 3rd round comp pick for him if he signs somewhere else, and we're just going to draft his replacement. We're going to bring in a Quinshon Judkins. You know what I mean? Like,
well, so somebody that pairs well with Ray Davis, right?
Yeah, and Ray Davis is somebody who I liked his tape a lot as well. So. Yeah, I don't think any running backs are safe, and it's hard for any running back to be safe at any times. I mean, even the time like the running backs you think are safe, then the Lions got there Jahmyr Gibbs because he's the best player on their board. And you're like, well, the Lions just took Jahmyr Gibbs? Like, what is going on here? They have Dave Montgomery out there. So, yeah, man, get rid of those running backs. They could all go, but that should always be the case, right? Like hashtag 2 to 3 year window. Like it's so hard. Like. When you look at the consistency of running backs, like outside the top guys, like there's those core guys, like the Bijan, the Gibbs, incoming Justin Genty falls in that category. Like those guys are like 1st round, 2nd round startup value because they're under 23 years old and they're elite. Like those guys are like outliers where everybody else is like, if you can get to like, I'd like to reference everybody, go back and find our show. It's a running back, like I think it's titled Odds to Be a Running Back 1. How often to be a running back 1. We've done this show twice and we did deep dives going back 15 years and looking at running backs and how often they are running back 1s. Like not running back 1 overall, it's just running back 1 through 12. 95% of running backs don't do it more than once. That's it. Like once. And then twice is like amazing, right? And then the guys that fill out the list are always like they're the guys that have done it like Alvin Kamara is a GOAT, right? Before Alvin Kamara has done it 7 years. Before him, it was LaShawn McCoy. Before him, it was like LaDainian Thomas. You know what I mean? Like these guys that did it every single year. But for the most part, these guys are outliers. So when you have a running back, like the odds of them being a running back 1 more than twice is unbelievably low. Like again, I wish I had the numbers. We broke down the statistics. We went through for the last 20 years of running backs that do this and how often they could repeat this category. And it's unbelievably low that you really do have to have like that position being so fluid because they get hurt so much. There's these young guys that come in. You need to be PPR guys. So like the odds of them repeating that are unbelievably low. And you want to make sure that you are able to pivot off that and get value. It's why I always have a running back. It doesn't no matter how, unless they're an outlier guy, like a guy like LT, a guy like Bijan. When these guys sign their second contracts, like I'm done with them for the most part. Like, cause that's gonna be peak value. They signed a really good contract. Like I can usually get a really good return on that player. And again, I'm trying to build long-term success. Like, I'm going to go ahead and trade that guy, and I'm going to get multiple draft picks or get another younger running back and a receiver I like for value. And I'll figure out fixing that running back hole later if I can. Even guys that you love, like Jonathan Taylor, right? Comes off his rookie year, running back 1 overall, has not reproduced that production. I know last year he ended the year great, but has not reproduced that yet. And we're going on year 5 of him in the league, right? Yeah. And at the time you had him, he's a first-round startup player that you have on your roster. And then you're like, I got a running back 1. He was just running back 1 overall. I'm set for life. And then since that, his rookie year, that's it, man. He hasn't done it again. Last year he was running back 12. So in 5 years, he's running back 1 overall and running back 12. So he has a running back 1 twice, which again, home run threat, but like you still don't have that value that you expected to get when you took him that high in your dynasty startup draft.
I want to do, I think this is a good opportunity for us tonight. And we're going to lead into the possibility of 3 running backs being taken in the first round of the 2025 NFL draft, Rich. And all the viewers are like, Balky, that's insane that this never happens. Rich, if I were to ask you, what year was the last time 3 running backs were taken in the first round of the NFL draft? Could you tell me the year?
Whatever year I think it was, where Cadillac, Williams, Ronnie Brown.
You would not have to go back that far.
Oh no, I wouldn't have to go back that far, huh?
Yep. No, you would not.
Oh man. I don't know.
Okay, you don't know. I'm going to tell you this right now. The year was 2018.
Okay.
Can you name any of the running backs that were taken in the first round of the NFL draft that year? I believe one of them is still in the league. I know one of them still in the league. I don't know about the other 2.
Was that the Melvin Gordon draft?
It was not. This guy went 2nd overall to the New York Giants in 2018.
Was that Saquon?
No, that's Saquon Barkley.
Saquon draft.
That was
okay.
Correct. Now,
yeah, he was running back 1 overall that year too.
Yeah, exactly. He was. Now, the other 2 running backs that were taken in the first round that year, 27th overall to the Seattle Seahawks. Do you remember who it was in 2018?
Oh, Rashad Penny.
Rashad Penny is correct. And then with the penultimate pick of the first round, number 31 to the New England Patriots. Do you remember who that running back was?
Oh, man.
From the University of, well, I won't say it.
I can see his face.
He had some knee issues in college for the Bulldogs of Georgia.
Lawrence Maroney.
It was not Maroney. Maroney was a Golden Gopher. This guy was paired with Todd Gurley, I believe, for 1 year at Georgia. It was him and Gurley in the back.
Sony Michel.
Sony Michel is correct.
That's right, because then Nick Chubb went at
4 picks later. 4 picks later, Nick Chubb went to Cleveland right after.
I liked Sony Michel's tape a lot when he came out.
A lot of people. Listen. My biggest thing with Michel was, and I drafted him. I have a guy who there's one of my group texts on my iPhone. The guy renamed it Sony Michel no matter what after the the draft day
movie,
yeah. So it's for him it was Sony Michel at the 101 that year, which did not pan out obviously because Barkley was the right guy to go with. But his pass catching acumen is what I love. I don't want to turn this into a Sony Michel show. The reason I bring up 2018 was because that was the last time 3 running backs were taken in the first round of the NFL draft. You have proposed the possibility of 3 running backs going in the first round this year. What do you think the likelihood is that of that happen? Is it more than a coin flip? Are we talking about a 60% chance, 70% chance? How do you view it?
Well, let me ask you the question we've been asking everybody on our team. Here's our Dynasty Nerds question. We talk about the running back class, and the same question you have, because we all have the same question. It goes, if you had to bet your real money on it, and you can't push, you got to win or lose. The over under is 2. What do you take? The safe bet's 1, obviously. That's the safe money bet. You know what I mean? But I think there's a good chance it's 3 running backs.
I would take the under, but I could easily see myself losing on this. Now, we all know Genty. That's the big one. Who are the other 2? Is it Hampton and I know you're a big Travion Henderson guy, right?
Yeah, he's my rookie running back too.
Okay, so it's Henderson and Hampton that you would see going in the first round.
And it would, again, if Quinshon Judkins went in the first, which I know sounds crazy. It sounds crazy.
Not after the combine, it doesn't sound crazy.
I mean, when Clyde Edwards-Helaire went to the first, that was crazy. Like, it was my number one running back on film that year. Like he went ahead of Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins, and DeAndre Swift, who I had all graded higher than him at the time. So yeah, I mean, it's the way I look at it. So right now for Dynasty, I have Ashton Genty in tier 1 by himself, easily by himself. But then in tier 2, I have them all really close. It's Trevion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, and Omarion Hampton. So I'll let the NFL draft kind of decide how that really shapes itself, because they're in the same tier, and
draft capital will matter, obviously, for sure.
Yeah, you know what I mean. But so if I'm a huge Browns fan. Say Omarion Hampton went to the Denver Broncos in the first, and then at pick 33, the Browns took Trevion Henderson, and he's my number 2 back. I would probably take Trevion Henderson, but that's a homer. That's me being a homer as well. You know what I mean? So, yeah, those guys are all super close. I think Quinshon Judkins and Hampton are pretty close to the same player. What you're getting out of them, their skill sets, they're pretty similar. But Trevion Henderson's my number 2 is because what he brings into the passing game and how explosive he is. And those are the fantasy football running backs that I want, right? Again, I always compare going back to, you mentioned a guy like Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara is not the best running back in the NFL, and he never has been. But he's the best fantasy football running back we've had for the last 7 years overall when it comes to consistency. So it's about scheme, it's about skill sets. And I want those pass catcher running backs that are explosive and home run threats. And that's what Trevion Henderson is. So, if wherever he ends up, I'm gonna be real excited. But again, we're splitting hairs. This hair is so so that's tier 1. Then you have those guys, 3 guys in tier 2. Then right now, tier 3 is massive. You know what I mean? It's got a lot of guys in there that you can make a case for. You mentioned a guy earlier, Dylan Sampson. I absolutely love Dylan Sampson's tape. Absolutely love it. Him, Cam Scattaboo fall into that category as well. But when I watch a guy like Dylan Sampson I don't when I watch college football, I don't watch it and study it, right? I watch it as a fan. I'm an Ohio State fan. I lived at Ohio State for 5 years. So for me, that's my school. I watch that. And then big time games I'll watch and I'll pay attention. Ashton Genty went on my radar, I'll pay attention. But for the most part, when I go into my tape studies, I go in raw. So I go in unbiased and I'm just watching their tape. And when I watch tape, we have tape at Dynasty Nerds. It's another thing we're really known for. We have an all 22 film library. Yep. We have the most expansive library out there. So when I'm watching the film, I go in there with no preconceived notions, right? So I don't have any bias going to these players some other people, right? I still have, Caleb Johnson's another guy you throw in a tier 3, some of these guys. So when I throw in the tape of Dylan Sampson, I was truly blown away. I watched 7 games on this kid because I was I ended up watching him right after I watched Ashton Genty too. So I was am I just in rookie fever right now? It's never been the case. What's going on here? And so I kept watching game after game, and he's 5'8", but he's got the 200 pounds. And I just love the way the kid moved in between the tackles. So his feet and his vision, and the way he was always just able to gain positive yards and get 4 yards and get 4 yards and boom, break off a big run, 4 yards, big run. And the way he moved his footwork and the way he navigated between the tackles, which I was surprised at, because the first thing I do is I go through and put all their stats in, their height, their weight, any kind of numbers I have. And then obviously we start to really dig in after the combine. You start putting their combine numbers in there as well. So I'm 5'8". First thing I see of Dylan Sampson, running back, Tennessee, 5'8", 200 pounds. So my first thought is okay, 5'8", 200 pounds. That's good. That's a nice starting point. That's okay
for today's NFL. I think that's changed over the past half decade.
Yeah. So I'm watching 5. I'm okay. And then I put on tape. And I'm watching this 5'8", 200 pound running back just carve up the SEC defenses. Just carve them up. So I'm ecstatic. I'm this kid is unbelievable. I'm in for a treat. And then I'm watching, I go from Dylan Sampson, and then I watched Kalo Mullins. I thought he wasn't good, but then we watched Bashal Tutin. Oh, this guy's got some upside too. Little disappointed because he's a guy I heard a lot about, and then obviously blew up the combine. So I was a little bit more disappointed with his tape than from what I heard, but a really nice running back. You know what I mean? Overall. So tape after tape on these guys, I've been so pleasantly surprised. We just came out with this week, episode 2 of our breakdowns on running backs. And I loved every guy on that roster. Mario and Hampton, I thought was obviously an absolute stud. But outside of him, we broke guys down outside of Mario and Hampton that got guys that I didn't know about, like Ollie Gordon, who had a bad year this year, but the previous year dominated. Had some pretty good tape, and he's going to be a really good A or B in the running back scheme for somebody. You talk about the kid out of Oregon as well, Jordan James. Really liked his tape too. A PPR running back, which the guys are a lot, which I love. I heard a lot of negative things about Trevor Etienne on X, right? Like a lot of people just talking down about Trevor Etienne. I throw on his tape, pleasantly surprised. Thought he was a really solid running back. Probably throw him right around like running back 12, right between 10 and 12 overall in this class. But again, this is a really deep class. So in most years, Trevor Etienne's like running back 5 on my board. I mentioned Mario Hampton or Mario Brown on Northern Illinois. Somebody who I thought was going to be absolutely terrible. Pleasantly surprised. You're not going to find a lot of film on him. We do have 3 games of all 22 on him in the Dynasty Nerds film room. So overall, like, and those are just these past 2 shows we did. This running back class, like I said, Devin Neal, Cam Scattaboo, Caleb Johnson, LaQuiz Allen. Like, there's a lot of upside, and I'm really excited. I'm always excited for the NFL draft, but Eric, I think not only is there a good chance to have 3 running backs in this class, I think in the first round, I think we're almost guaranteed to get 2, I want to say, because they're that talented. I think day 2 in the second and third round, we're going to be sitting there like, we're like, dude, is this a dynasty rookie draft? Boom, running back, running. Like, they're going to be going off the boards. And, you know, a lot of people will say like, well, why would an NFL team draft a running back that high when the class is so deep, they're going to wait till later? Okay, well, do you want the 10th best running back on your board, or do you want the number 1 running back on your board? Like, it's a bit, that's like saying, oh, why draft at 1-6 in your super flex draft when you can draft at 112? You know what I mean? Like, it's such a deep class, even like last year. Well, that's the difference between Brock Bowers and getting Keon Coleman or Jonathan Brooks. You know what I mean? Like, that's the difference. And you know, you want the player that you had the highest on your board. And some teams are like, yeah, I could get Devin Neal, or I could get a Mario and Hampton. And I have one graded significantly better. And it doesn't mean Devin Neal's bad. It just means I think this guy puts our team in a much better position to win games on Sundays.
What about, as long as we were talking about Dylan Sampson, I've been asking a lot of people about this too, Rich. Okay. Tennessee running backs over the last couple of years. You had Jalen Wright last year, who obviously went to the Dolphins. Probably going to be their number 2 running back this year, at least how it stands right now with the release of Raheem Mostert. We'll see what they do in the draft. But you had Jalen Wright and you had Dylan Sampson. Knowing that you watched the film on Wright last year, knowing that you've watched the film on Sampson this year, how would you compare and, quite frankly, contrast those 2 running backs, Sampson versus Wright?
I feel like Jalen Wright's a little bit more explosive. I would like Jalen Wright like on the outside more than like Dylan Sampson, and I think Dylan Sampson can win on the outside. But like Dylan Sampson's tape again, he predominantly ran inside between the tackles, the A gap, the B gap, at
5'8", 200.
Yeah, consistently. I mean, again, I the way my motto for Dylan Sampson is, if there's a crease, he's the grease. Like, he's getting through there. Like, that's right. That's my nickname. That's why I named him on the podcast. Like, that's my slogan for Dylan Sampson. If there's a crease, he's the grease. Like, he's gonna get in there. So, but like similar, I think grade wise, pretty similar, because I just went off on the podcast this past week and how much I love Dylan Sampson. Now, that being said, he's still like my 6th running back overall. And I love him. You know what I mean? And I love him. But again, we have those top 4. But then Cam Scattaboo is another really, really nice running back out of Arizona State. A big kid, runs routes, catches the football well, going to bulldoze at the goal line. That's really good. And like a ton of people, I haven't dug deep into Caleb Johnson yet out of Iowa, who a lot of people have high as well. But, you know, that's the guy who people talk about. But like right now, like, if you told me like I have 1-6 and at 1-6 I get Cam Scattaboo or Dylan Sampson on my roster, and this is like, say it's just a standard league, like there's not super flex, right? Like it's gonna go 1 through 6 running backs, take all the like you can't draft any receivers, tight ends, or quarterbacks. You can only draft running backs. And I have a middle of the road pick at 1-6, like where normally you're getting like a turd. I'm pretty ecstatic. Like, I'm feeling really good about it. And then it comes back to pick 12. Like, I still feel really good about it for the upside because I'm gonna get some guys that offer some PPR upside. And I love those running backs. I love getting those Danny Woodheads, those James Whites, right? That's where the juice is, like those Jerick McKinnons that can come out and produce. Like those guys that are, it's fine that they're only getting 13 touches per game, but they're getting five carries between it. They're getting 5 carries, and they're going to catch 5 to 7 passes. Those are double-digit week in, week out fantasy football guys, and I want as many as those guys on my roster as possible.
I think the other thing I have to bring up here, and I don't know how you fall in on this, and I think I don't want to say he's a polarizing guy, but Bashal Tutin had a really, really good scouting combine. In fact, you could make the case that nobody accelerated his stock more so than Bashal Tutin this past week in Indianapolis. Where do you fall in on him without, and obviously we don't want to double count what he did at the combine because quite frankly, he was expected to shine in a lot of these drills, which he did. But Bashal Tutin, when you talk about him as an NFL player, knowing that I don't know if he's going to go on day 2, how does he fall in for you, knowing what you know about him at the moment right now prior to the NFL draft?
Yeah, so with Tutin, I think his combine kind of pushed him into day 2. I can see him now going in the 3rd round because he had that combine. NFL teams salivate over that kind of speed, a 4.32. And I kind of brought his name up earlier because, like, after the combine, people are talking him up, and he's been a name that's been on, X for a while now. So when you see how athletic he is, like when I throw on his tape, I was like, I expect to see a guy who's going to be like a shifty running back who's super fast and got loose hips. And that was actually the complete opposite of what he does. What's funny about it is, Tutin is he's a outside zone scheme runner, right? That's where he lives. He's a one cut and go kind of guy. Mm-hmm. And we've seen that win. We saw a guy like Chris Johnson, back in the day. He was a one cut and go speed running back. That's what Tutin is. So with him, he's fine. He can catch the football, but I don't think he dominates there. He still has to work on some route running because like a lot of his stuff that he did was like he was just catching stuff and getting upfield. But he can burn. He plants his foot. He moves. But overall, I mean, he's gonna fall in like running back like 9 for me, 8 for me. I got to really solidify my grades overall. But a nice running back that I like, but I'm gonna let the NFL draft capital kind of show me where he ends up going because his vision I thought was just okay. Like I thought his vision was just okay. I thought his route running was just okay. He's not very loose. He's not laterally agile as for a guy who's that fast. I would hope him to be, but overall, like a really nice prospect overall because he's a home run threat that can really get it done.
I think he is going to be a guy that we will watch. I mean, any of these, like you say, Friday, Rich, is going to be interesting at the draft because that is when dynasty teams are going to get blown up with all these running backs going off the board. We've done so much talk about running backs. I want to continue that conversation. I also want to just briefly hit on some quarterbacks, wide receivers, and tight ends. So let's take a break, catch our breath. When we come back, we'll talk more rookies here with Rich Dotson, Dynasty Rich on the X, of course, dynastynerds.com. Check out the podcast and, of course, download the Dynasty Nerds GM app anywhere you get your apps, including the App Store and Google Play. Rich Dotson, Eric Balkman, coming back right after this on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network.
Andrew Cooper here of Fantasy Alarm, and if you're anything like me, football season never ends. Super Bowl's over. Who cares? We got the combine. We got the draft. We got free agency coming up here. We got a lot of speculation to do. And the best way to take advantage of that is at myffpc.com. Mock drafts are fun. They're fine. But if you really want to get leverage, get in one of their never too early best ball drafts or never too early super flex drafts now where you can take advantage of all your takes. I'm in there now because I got hunches, right? I got ideas for free agency. I got ideas for the drafts. I got ideas for the 2025 NFL season, and I want to get them on paper now. And I want to do so before the NFL draft, right? Before the cat's out of the bag. That's the beauty of these contests, right? You go in and you get set up, and the drafts are already going, and they end on April 24th, right when the NFL draft starts. So you can get in there, get all your takes in, take advantage of everything before everybody finds out what happens. Use promo code ALARM at myffpc.com when you get set up. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more, and you can get in these tournaments, the Never Too Early Best Ball and the Never Too Early Super Flex contest, to get your shot at $10,000 or $40,000 grand prizes.
Welcome back to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. He is Rich Dotson. Dynasty Rich on the X from DynastyNerds.com. Want to remind you, too, if you are looking to put some of this content we're producing for you tonight to your own benefit, check out myffpc.com. The Big Gorilla Tournament is going on right now, live and slow drafts, a $1 million grand prize at just a $350 entry fee. Remember, you get that $50 discount with every third team you buy. Drafts going on slow and live at the moment. Early Rampage Tournament, 7 Bananas promos are going on right now, too. If you enter now, you will be entered into 2 separate tournaments for 1 entry fee, the Big Gorilla and the Early Rampage, and you put yourself in position to win a Jungle Safari for 4, courtesy of the Fantasy Football Players Championship. myffpc.com is where to go for that. At Dynasty Rich on the X. This has been so much fun tonight, Rich, talking with you about all these running backs. What I didn't ask you, and I know you brought up Omario Brown from Northern Illinois, are there any other sleeper running backs that you're paying attention to that perhaps maybe won't go on day 1 or day 2, that are day 3 guys that you think we should at least be aware of right now, knowing that there's a chance they could sneak into day 2? But even if they don't, we should know them for our Dynasty rookie drafts coming up in May.
I mean, a couple guys already mentioned, outside of Brown was, like James Jordan out of Oregon. He's somebody that's probably going to slip a little bit. I don't think people have a lot of, and Trevor Etienne are 2 running backs I think offer that PPR upside. Caleb Johnson's not a sleeper. Devin Neal's not a sleeper. The thing is, like,
what about, let me throw these 2 guys at you. Just your thoughts on them. DJ Giddens, RJ Harvey.
Yeah, RJ Harvey, I've watched casually. I haven't deep dived into him yet to do my complete breakdown. And Giddens, he's on my. It's funny, Giddens on my list tomorrow to break down.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, so it's crazy. Like this time of year, like when people are like, "Oh, Rich, you break down film," but like I'm in the middle of my process now. Like you're like, "Oh, let's talk rookie receivers." I had a message. I was like, Eric, like I'm still in the middle of like my running back. Like this time of year, like I start because what I don't like to do is like because I have to study so many of these guys, and then I have to break them down on the podcast, and like it's so like it's such a hurry. It's a disservice to like I want all their I need to know their height. I need to know their weight. I want to know their combine stuff. So like I really try to like push like I've been doing this for 11 years on like break it down on actual like for the show wise. And I've had a lot of success doing it. So I stick with my program and I don't even touch the rookie stuff until 2 weeks like before the combine right around there. And I start with the quarterbacks because like the combine doesn't matter for me for the quarterbacks. You know what I mean? So like I start there with the quarterbacks.
Why does the combine not matter for you for quarterbacks?
Because for the most part, like a lot of those guys, like you get the Senior Bowl information, so you'll get their height and weight for the most part there. That'll come out, and like, and honestly, for the film, like I go watch film, but like I watch it, but I take it with like a grain of salt. Like I don't try and sit here. Like, listen, man, I'm never gonna be a phony, right? Like, and sit here and like try and talk like this is fact and this is. Breaking down a quarterback is so much more than even just watching a film because it's so much more about the mental aspect of the game too, where they get drafted, how it goes. And all I describe is like these NFLs, they get paid tens of millions of dollars to find that quarterback. And they have more information than I will ever be able to sniff. And it's 50-50 at best. So for me, the way I use quarterbacks is I study the tape. I give my opinions on their footwork, their release, their vision, like everything I can from like what you're trained to do when you're watching tape, right? And I give that. But for the most part, the way I watch quarterbacks, it's a very simple process. It goes, okay, one, does he have 35 starts under his belt? Because, again, like we studied, if you go back to Dynasty Nerds history, we have how I talked about the running back history. We did the last 20 years of receivers. We did the last 20 years of tight end. We did the last 20 quarterbacks. And what I'll give everybody information quarterback wise is our study shows if you don't have 35 starts under your belt, there's a less than 50% chance that you're going to be a hit. And by hit, I mean you're going to have a QB 1 year in fantasy. Less than 50% chance. And that's if you're taking
Anthony Richardson right away, exhibit A on that.
Yeah. So, and that's if you're a first round running quarterback. If you're a first round quarterback with under 35 starts, I think it's a 40% chance of you being a hit. And you're a first round pick. If you don't have 35 starts and you're not a first round pick, there's been 0 quarterbacks, 0.0 that have been a quarterback one in fantasy.
Wow.
So the way I like quarterbacks, kind of like the way I look at it for Superflex drafts is 1, you got to be a first round pick. 2, and then on top of that, I want you to be a top 10 pick. And then you got to want to have 35 starts. So I really, for the most part, like when I watch the tape, I give my opinion. I let the NFL tell me about the quarterbacks, right? Because again, you'd be silly to sit here and say that you know more than any NFL GM and how much money they put into that. Like they hire people to go do background checks, talk to people. Just like you said, you mentioned draft day earlier. That's real life. They do that kind of stuff. So my tape.
Why was nobody at Shadur Sanders' birthday party? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, I mean, dude, I liked Zach Wilson's tape. I did. I thought he was like. Then he got the draft capital behind it, so I was like, "Ooh, look at me!" Like I liked his tape. Like you know what I mean? Kind of reminded me of Baker at the time. Like, and then like he had the draft capital to go with it. I'm like, yes, look at me. Like he went second. He was my number 2 quarterback after watching tape. So for the most part, like I'll break down the film. I like Cam Ward a lot. Like I think he has the most upside in this draft. And then like I like Shadur Sanders and Jackson Dart. Like I'm a Browns fan. I'd kind of prefer that we get Jackson Dart over Shadur Sanders. I think he has a higher upside than Sanders. And then I like Quinn Ewers and I like Will Howard and then I like Tyler Shuck. And then that's it. You know what I mean? But like, and all those guys, like I don't love, but like if those guys don't get the draft capital and where I need them to get draft capital for the most part, like you're going to get a couple outliers. You're going to get the Russ Wilsons, Jalen Hurts, Brock Purdy's, who's the ultimate outlier. But dude, you're talking outliers, and I don't rely on outliers. You know what I mean? So for me, the quarterbacks I can start early because like I'm just watching the film, and whatever the film tells me, like the combine doesn't mean people like, oh, Will Howard had a bad combine. I could care less. Watch. You know what I care more about? Watch Will Howard's last 4 games of his college career. He was the best quarterback in college football. He was the best quarterback in college football for the last 4 games of the year. So the tape means more to me than anything else and honestly, Eric, that goes for all players. Like the combine doesn't do much for me, but like it will tell me the difference of like, okay, how tall is that running back? Is he 5'8" or is he 5'7"? Is he over 200 pounds? Is he not over 200 pounds, right? Like, does he like how fast is his 40 is not important, but like same thing, like the combine for the receivers. Like I want to see him run the gauntlet. Like it's an important drill for me. Like I think the gauntlet correlates for me. I remember the first time watching Vincent Jackson out of North Dakota. I think it was North Dakota, but Vincent Jackson run the gauntlet. I was like, that kid is a stud. Watch those. That kid is going to be good. And then I know much about him. And then gets in the second round, drafted by Chargers. I'm like, that's the guy I was talking about. Like his combine was great. Ended up having a really good career. And I drafted him as a rookie. And the reason I took Vincent Jackson was because of his combine, because I didn't have a film room like I did today. I kind of watched highlights where I could and whatnot. And then I was like, man, his combine and him running the gauntlet was the difference between me drafting him and not. So going back for the quarterbacks, it's just so hard for me to like put any merit into the combine for quarterbacks. Like I want to know their size of their hands. I want to know how tall they are, but like the tape is going to speak for itself. For the most
because the tape is more important than seeing these guys throw to pass catchers that they have not thrown to all season, right? Because you can make the case that Will Howard nobody had a worse combine than he did as far as the quarterback goes. But that's kind of a loaded thing, right? Because you're asking these guys to look really good, and to look really good, you got to develop some chemistry. You can't develop chemistry in the span of 48 hours.
And Eric, and then I don't care if he throws, he looks fantastic. You're in shorts throwing against air, against nobody, and you're staring down that one receiver. Like, that's like saying he could throw 70 yards from his knees. I don't give a rat's behind about that. Right. I want how many throws in the NFL are that go past 20 yards, like in a game? It's minimal at best. Like, I want my quarterback to be smart and accurate. That's all I care about. It's why I love Baker so much, because he was so accurate. And what makes Shadur Sanders nice, to be honest with you, because he's such an accurate quarterback. Like, I don't need you to have a rocket arm. Can you throw it 15 yards? Good enough for me. Because
accurately throw it 15 yards accurately.
Yeah. Can you lead a receiver? Can you anticipate? Can you read a defense? Are you smart? Like, you know what I mean? Like, all that matters. And so much, that's what I'm saying, for a quarterback, so much of it is mental. It has nothing to do with how strong your arm is. It's all mental. If you can't read a defense, you're not going to succeed in the NFL, right? Like, if you can't anticipate, you're not going to succeed in the NFL. I don't care how strong your arm is. Now, when it all comes together, you have a rocket arm like Josh Allen and Justin Herbert, it's a thing of glory. It really is. But for the most part, it's just too hard. So, like, for the quarterbacks, we watch the tape, we break it down. We always do them first because, again, the combine, none of that matters. And then, but we really let the NFL draft dictate it, because, I always say, when it comes to a quarterback, if you're, for example, quarterback 18 last year, Eric, 18, a quarterback 2, essentially, a mid-range quarterback 2, was the 54th highest scoring player in PPR leagues. So even a mid-range quarterback 2 is still going to be, overall, when you're talking about all players, top 55. And that's a quarter range 2. So those guys matter. So when a quarterback goes top 10 in the NFL draft, and same thing, almost in the first round too, because if you go in the first round, you're guaranteed to be a starter at some point, right? Yeah. And you're insulated some too. You're going to get a little bit of time, and that value holds in Dynasty well, so you get some insulation there. But especially if you're a top 10 guy, I'm investing in you, and I don't even need you to be great. I just need you to play and be okay. I need you to be the 18th best quarterback in the league, because then you're a championship caliber player. And then even if you're quarterback 19, somewhere around there, guess what? You're still a top 70 overall scorer in Dynasty or fantasy. And that's, and what do? How do you win championships? How do you beat your opponents? Whoever scores the most points. So for me, like, I'm a big proponent in Superflex. I want those guys. They have the longest careers. They score the most points. They're the most insulated players. If you look, the NFL is so thirsty for them. If you look just okay, if you're okay, there's a good chance you're going to get a contract extension and be insulated there. So for me, the quarterback is just like the NFL kind of like, I'll watch the tape. I'll give you my opinion, but even I take my opinion like with a grain of salt, because I know for doing this for the last 11 years, it's too hard to predict. It's literally 50-50. And it's the same way in the NFL. It's 50-50.
I think the thing that I learned from Tom Brady in his final 4 or 5 years in New England, I understood that in today's NFL, it's the game is won not only in the trenches, but those 10 yards, just moving the chains. And Brady never had the biggest arm, but he was super smart, had a lot of experience, and he was accurate in getting the ball to Edelman and Welker and Gronk and Hernandez and all these guys within 10, 15 yards down the field. And I think if you can do that, to your point, you will be a successful NFL quarterback.
Yeah, guy like Drew Brees is one of my all-time favorite quarterbacks of all time. Same thing, lived on it. Guy was small, 6 foot tall, threw from his tippy toes, but boy, was that guy pinpoint accurate.
Which is huge. I mean, if you can diagnose a defense and you can throw the ball accurately 15 yards down the field, you have a future in the NFL. And people are craving quarterbacks in the NFL that can do that, and there's just not enough of them.
Yeah, there's always a place to throw it. It's just, do you know where that spot is?
That spot is going to be.
Right?
Exactly. Yep. Yes. Yeah. Carlo Dexter, I have an interesting quarterback question I want to ask you, but I'm going to go to Carlo Dexter's question in YouTube right now. I imagine this is a dynasty startup that he is looking at. He has the choice between Marvin Harrison Jr. and Ashton Genty. Which player would you rather have? And I think this is interesting because we can. I mean, this isn't necessarily a vacuum question. This is a question of like, what asset do you value more right now, Rich?
Yeah, I think I would probably lean Genty by a hair.
But it's very close. It's obviously
very close.
Yeah.
And the reason I would lean Genty is because there's so few of those cornerstone running backs. And we did a study, like, again, I'm going back to kind of our study on those players. Well, we kind of learned and kind of pivoted from, we're like, oh, you always just take the young receivers in startups. You really take the young receiver in startups, which is true. But those we mentioned earlier, Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson's, I mean, how many of those young guys you want to throw in there? Gibbs, Robinson, Brees with that knee is a little bit worried, but then, I mean, Saquon's a little older, but you kind of want to throw him in there. Then you got Brees, you got Devon Achane. Those are probably the 5 cornerstone running backs you probably call right now in Dynasty that you feel good about long-term value. There's not a lot of those guys out there where, like, yeah, I love Marvin Harrison Jr., but we just talked a minute ago about, like, or an hour ago about Brian Thomas Jr., right? Like, there's so many more of those guys. Like, so I would rather have, again, it's supply and demand, kind of like we talked about, like George Kittle, right? Either like Brock Bowers goes so high because he's 1 of 1 and there's nobody else out there at that position. Right. Trey McBride goes so high because he's 2 of 2 and there's nobody else at that position. So if I get Ashton Genty and he's that running back that could fill into that Bijan Robinson role, be that guy at 22 years old, and you want to talk about length, that means I probably got 6-7 years of Ashton Genty at running back. You probably got about 7 years of Marvin Harrison Jr. too. And which one is more supply and demand, right? Like where's my best value? And running backs always, because again, they're so fluid and they're so hard to come by. If you have that elite running back, it's way easier to go trade him for the receiver compared to trading that receiver for the running back. Because for the most part, people are going to have receivers on their roster because there's so many of them. I mean, Eric, you and I could sit here right now and probably name 15 receivers that we think could be running back ones, or I'm sorry, wide receiver ones.
Wide receiver
15.
ones, yeah.
There's only 12 of them, right? Like, and you can say confident, like, I really think it's got to be a running back one. We wouldn't say that about running backs. We wouldn't even say, like, again, it's going to be too fluid.
Didn't you just post on X, like, I don't know, a week or so ago about how the top 24 running backs from 2024 are going to look radically different in 2025? Because, like, I think to your point, the receivers, the changeover is not nearly as volatile as running backs. And that's the way the game is played. The NFL is played that way, where running backs churn over from year to year, less so than the receivers. Yeah,
100%. And it goes back to what we said earlier as well. It's why it's the most fluid position on my roster, right? Like, because every year it just changes. Now you'll still, but again, kind of go back, some of those elite guys will always be on there. Like Alvin Kamara's been on there. I mean, Joe Mixon, say what you want about him. If he's a running back one this year, I believe from our study, like he enters like that Hall of Fame, like elite category. I think it'd be like his 5th running back one season overall. And like I think the record is like 7, which again is like, I think Alvin Kamara falls in that category. I mean, there's not many of those guys that give you that year in, year out running back one production. Like those guys, and Genty falls in that category. And honestly, again, Judkins, Henderson, Hampton, those guys fall in that category too. So it's not like anything crazy. Like, and I'll give you an example. We were just talking about on the podcast, like we might regret this now if like some of these guys go in the first round, but Gary and I both made a move where we had a 1-2, where we ended up trading for it ended up being a 1-2, but like wasn't our pick. Whoever we traded for, like the previous years, that owner ended up 1-2. Him and I, he did a first. I was like, I'm just going to copy you. We each gave up 1-2 and our 26th first for 1-1. That's how much we believe in Ashton Genty and how much he could be Bijan.
Yeah.
And then we were just talking, like literally on Tuesday, we were saying, because now we're studying the running backs in depth. We're like, man, part of me says, like, if Hampton or Henderson go in the first, like, I'd rather just go have my 1-2 back and have that 26 first.
That's what I was going to bring up with you, because I think the fact that if 3 running backs go in the first round, and I went back, I'm not going to bore the viewers on this, but I went back and I looked over the course of the last 15, 20 years. It's happened multiple times where 3 running backs have gone in the first round. When they're going at the end of the first round, because a lot of times people these really good teams will invest in a running back after pick 25 or after pick 20, like at the very end of the first round. These are really good teams. So not only do these guys step in with first round draft capital, they step into a really good situation. Ostensibly, you would think with really good offenses that can move the ball up and down the field. I'm not saying they're going to be like if Henderson and Hampton or whoever gets drafted in the first round. I'm not saying they're on a level with Genty, but they're stepping into a situation that is probably better than Genty's. And their fantasy output could be in that same ballpark. And I think that's what makes it so fascinating about thinking about not only the 101, but the 102 and the 103 this year in whether you're talking about super flex or not super flex drafts, Rich.
Yeah, a dream scenario for me, and this is very, very in a realm of possibilities because the team literally just did it 5 years ago, is the Kansas City Chiefs taking Trevion Henderson in the first round because that's such a perfect fit for that. Like, what that speed to be able to get a lot of motion with Xavier Worthy getting that motion and then slipping out Trevion Henderson out and with a dump off or screen. Like, what a perfect fit. And again, that's a team that just 5 years ago spent a first round pick on a running back. So exactly. So why would and what do they have? They lacked a strong running game. And obviously the offensive line didn't do many favors at defensive line, but they have a strong running game versus the Eagles. So it wouldn't surprise me that he went there. And the same thing. Ashton Genty is a much graded, higher graded running back on the film. He was going to get drafted high. Say Genty goes wherever. I don't think he's going to go here. I don't think the Cowboys are going to take him. But let's say he went to the Cowboys at like 12, right? And then Henderson went to the Chiefs at 31. Like, even though he's a better running back in that scenario, it wouldn't surprise. Like, I'd still take Genty 1 easily. In my run 1-1. But in 6 years, we went look back into the future and saw Trevion Henderson. It wouldn't surprise me in the least bit if Trevion Henderson outscored Ashton Genty every single year.
And not only that, Rich, there will be people in the FFPC, if that scenario unfolds, that people will take Henderson over Genty. They just will. That will happen. And it may pan out, to your point. Last question, because we're running out of time. Last question, and I think this is a fun one to end on. You mentioned how 3 running backs could go in the first round. What's more likely this year in the first round of the 2025 NFL draft? 3 running backs get taken or 3 quarterbacks get taken among the top 32 picks?
Oh, 3 quarterbacks for sure.
Not even close. Not even close for you.
Yeah. I just don't see how Jackson Dart gets out of the first round. Like,
because of his combine, or where did this come from? Because all of a sudden within the last week or two, and now I'm hearing that Dart is going to be a first round pick.
Oh, I liked his tape too. Like, his tape to me, like, I thought him and Shurder Sanders were like neck and neck, honestly, from watching. Yeah. Like, dude, his arm, I mean, he could let it rip. He'll drive into the pockets. He'll anticipate with his receivers. And it's hard for me to see, like, how many teams need quarterbacks as well. Like honestly, like, I would be here, I'm a Browns fan, right? Like, diehard Browns fan, season ticket holder. I would prefer the Browns traded, like, say, this is my dream scenario is the Browns trade back out of 2 to the Raiders at 6. And then they get the Raiders first round pick next year. And that's all I care about. Like, just get the first round pick. I don't care about anything else. And then we take what some people look like as an overdraft and take Jackson Dart at 6. Like, I'd be all comfortable with that. Or the Browns take like Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter at 2, and they trade up from 33 and back into the first and take Jackson Dart. Like, I think he's got that much upside. And to me, like, a team like Pittsburgh who sits there in the middle of draft, they'd be silly to pass up a guy like Jackson Dart. Like, absolutely silly to pass him up. And they did the same thing. Like, they did Kenny Pickett there too. It didn't work out. But, like, listen, man, in the NFL, it's the haves and the have-nots, right? Either you have a quarterback that can win a Super Bowl, or you do not. And if you do not, you will not win a Super Bowl. Now, you can get a quarterback that is good enough to win a Super Bowl, a la like a Jalen Hurts, because I don't think Jalen Hurts is like an elite quarterback. Right. I think he's above average. I think he's a good quarterback. I think Jalen Hurts won the Super Bowl because of the team around him. Now, that pass to Devontae Smith to start off the second half was a thing of absolute beauty. I think he's a good quarterback. He proved me wrong. But, like, you have to swing. It's the reason the Browns got rid of Baker Mayfield in the first place, because they didn't think they could win a Super Bowl with Baker Mayfield, even though they took him number 1 overall, and they thought they could with Deshaun Watson. boy, were they wrong by by the worst trade in NFL history, because that's what the Browns do. They make the worst decisions possible. So, yeah, I think 3 quarterbacks. Eric, I think I would bet all my money that 3 quarterbacks go in the first round. All my money, because I don't think there's any way Jackson Dart gets out of the first round.
Go ahead.
I mean, because the Browns somehow pass on a quarterback at 2, so they move out of that pick somehow, which they probably won't. They're probably going to take a quarterback. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if, like, I can see the NFL right now, like, oh wow, because everybody's right now. If you look at all the insiders now, and the people that know, and people that have the accurate mock drafts, like Dane Brugler's, the Zierleins, like they have Shadur Sanders slipping in the first. They have him slipping.
Yes, they do.
Like into the teens, into the 20s. I would not, like, where everybody else would be shocked, and they say with the number 2, like the Giants trade the number 1 and take Cam Ward. With the number 2 pick in the 2025 NFL draft, the Cleveland Browns select quarterback Jackson Dart, Ole Miss. I wouldn't be like, oh my gosh. I'd be like, cool. I'm excited.
And he has 35 plus starts and would have top 10 draft capital, which
100%.
Makes him very attractive for fantasy football.
100%. I had the 1-2 in a Superflex league, and he'd be my pick because I'm a homer.
But that could be take out the homerism out of it. It still could be the correct pick there as well. Rich, this was so much fun. My God, we could go another 2 hours easily tonight. We just don't have the time. We're going to do this again sometime, I hope, for sure. A lot of great feedback tonight. For anybody who is craving more Rich Dotson content, dynastynerds.com, the Dynasty Nerds podcast. Download the Dynasty Nerds GM app in the App Store and Google Play to help you out with all of your Dynasty leagues, including but not limited to the FFPC Dynasty leagues. What else am I forgetting? Am I forgetting anything else?
Check out dynastynerds.com. So we have all the tools. Like, we have the Dynasty Nerds film room right now. If you want to watch rookies, all 22 film, the most expansive library you're going to find. But anything we're talking about, you can find on dynastynerds.com. So go to dynastynerds.com. You'll see everything we have, from the podcasts, to the tools, to the articles, which are free. We have no paywall articles. We make sure that's all free. We just, we have one goal. When I started this company 11 years ago, I said, I just want to make people better Dynasty players. And that's our focus. It has been 11 years, and I feel very confident we've done that. I would put our content and our strategies against anybody else in the business. So, yeah, just check us out, dynastynerds.com, and we're going to put you one step closer to doing what we all want to do. And that's win that ship.
And win the ship. And I can't believe I've waited 2 hours into the show to say this, but as Dynasty Rich would say, an overpay today can be an underpay tomorrow when you're talking Dynasty trades. That and much more. DynastyNerds.com is where to go. Play the FFPC Big Gorilla. Play the FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball Tournaments. Pick up some Dynasty Orphans at myffpc.com. I want to remind everybody to go to myffpc.com for all those tournaments. Check out DynastyNerds.com, the Dynasty Nerds GM app, and then, of course, the Dynasty Nerds podcast with you, Garrett Price, and, of course, Matt O'Hara. You guys do a great job. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, Rich.
Thanks for having me. I had a good time.
That is Rich Dotson for him and for Matt Deutsch. I am Eric Balkman. This has been the FFPC High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. We'll be back at 7 o'clock next Thursday night. Be good, everybody. Enjoy the weekend.